Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, I will now continue the unfinished story. Chapter 15, Kong Yun. Almost as soon as they heard the sound, the three of them jumped up. Without even half a second, Lin Sanjiu turned her palm and was holding the chef's knife as she asked sternly, "Who's that?" Her cold tone of her voice resonated in the darkness. "Ah, don't be nervous. It's me. I am Kong Yun from downstairs," there was a reply from the dark corridor in front of the nanny's room. Kong Yun sounded a little tired yet quite seemingly gratified. "That's great. So you guys have flashlights," she said and walked toward them even without an invitation to enter the apartment. "Flashlight? Where?" The three of them immediately realized what Kong Yun was talking about and silently cursed about it. The ability polishing agent was really too bright, so much so that Kong Yun could see the light that it emitted even from the emergency door. At this point, they could hear Kong Yun's slow footsteps approaching. In a moment of anxiety, Marcy kicked the ability polishing agent toward the sofa. Just before the little bottle hit the sofa, it disappeared into countless fragments of light and integrated itself into the sofa. The living room suddenly became dark. "Huh? Why did you switch off the flashlight?" "I can't see anything," Kong Yun commented, sounding rather dissatisfied. Lin Sanjiu frowned her brow slightly. She had a sudden inspiration and quickly replied, "That was my mobile phone. It just ran out of battery." "Big sister Kong, didn't we ask you to wait for us in your apartment? Why did you come up?" After a pause, she surfaced her doubts, "So, how did you know that I lived here?" Taking this opportunity while they talked, she placed her hand on the leg of the corpse. There was a brief white light, and the floor became empty. Just as she squished the card into her hand, Kong Yun made her way to the living room, groping in the dark. The very moment she stepped into the living room, Luther lit up his lighter. Under the orange-red glow, Kong Yun looked somewhat pathetic. Her face and body were covered in sweat, and her strands of hair were pasted to her forehead. Feeling their gaze, she gave Lin Sanjiu an embarrassed chuckle. "The security guard told me once that you and your boyfriend were the owners of the top floor. Your apartment is situated way too high. I feel very tired after climbing up from the 26th floor." Even though she had already evolved, that was not something surprising. Without the strength enhancement, not everyone had as good a physique as Lin Sanjiu. Just after Lin Sanjiu placed the knife down, and with her heart still pinning to look at the paper on the floor, she forced a smile. "Big sister Kong, why did you come up?" "Nothing really." Kong Yun looked a little hard-pressed. "I was alone in my apartment, and my husband is still missing. I just felt frightened." This wasn't something incomprehensible. The three of them looked at each other, and Luther suddenly gave Kong Yun a grin, showing his set of white teeth. "Big sister Kong, it's great that you are here. It saved us the trouble of going downstairs to get you. You see, we brought some rice here so that we could cook a bit of porridge. Do you want to eat some?" Lin Sanjiu clapped silently in her heart. That was a brilliant excuse. Otherwise, the scene of them standing randomly in the middle of the living room did felt rather unnatural. Kong Yun was visibly distracted as she looked at the sack of rice, then she began to laugh. "Why not? Even though that rice is not suitable to make porridge, but that's a good idea. You all should rest, let me cook." "Okay, let me help." Marcy carried the sack of rice and headed to the kitchen. Kong Yun could not help being curious about Marcy. She quickly followed behind her, asking, "Your Mandarin is really good, where are you from?" After seeing the two of them chatting, entering the kitchen, starting to make preparation for cooking the porridge, Luther finally handed a hard piece of something calmly to Lin Sanjiu. It turned out that he managed to retrieve the paper on the ground at some time. "So, this is..." Lin Sanjiu was just about to say something when the young man interrupted her. "Let's discuss this when we go back." "Go back?" You mean you are not planning to bring her to the supermarket? Lin Sanjiu reacted quickly. He seemed to have said that instinctively, without thinking much about it. Hearing her words, he frowned, showing a conflicted look. Indeed, not bringing Kong Yun and leaving her, a recently evolved, almost powerless person outside, seemed rather unkind. On the other hand, since they did not share any life and death situation with her, they could not trust her, so it did not seem appropriate to bring her back to the supermarket either. Let's observe first. Maybe, she has her own plans, so we don't have to help her make that decision, Lin Sanjiu comforted Luther after seeing his somewhat hilarious scrunched-up face. Kong Yun probably cooked often at home. The lack of light did not hinder her nimble movement. She diced the vacuum-packed salt-water chicken, added some seasoning and boiled them with the porridge for half an hour. Soon, the air was filled with a fragrant aroma. Not having eaten a normal meal in more than a year, Luther's mouth quickly filled up with saliva. Come, it is ready. After placing the pot of porridge on the dining table, Marcy searched for a few sets of utensils and scooped out 4 bowls of porridge. The porridge from the pot was steaming, the snow-white rice shimmered as they reflected the light from the lighter. The few of them blew on their porridge and prodded it with their spoons. At long last, they could start eating. They impatiently scooped up a spoonful of porridge. Even though the porridge was hot, it wasn't uncomfortable for them to eat it. A pleasant warmth filled their stomachs as the sweet salty aftertaste of the chicken porridge remained on their tongues. Counting the time that had passed, Lin Sanjiu had actually eaten a more delicious salmon just 24 hours before. But somehow, this meal of chicken porridge she was having, after her world was destroyed, tasted like something a lifetime ago. Marcy ate a mouthful of porridge and asked Kong Yun coolly, "How did you pass the time alone yesterday?" As Luther wanted to eat, he had set aside his lighter before that. Since it was dark, they could not see Kong Yun's actual expression clearly. They only heard her saying, rather wistfully, "After waking up last night, I kept searching for my husband. Calls were not going through, and the security guards have all fainted. I went out, drove for a couple of rounds and met many people just wandering and stumbling around the streets like madmen. It scared me, so I immediately went home. I bore with it until morning when it was really too hot, so I hid in my washroom and fell asleep. I don't even know how's my husband right now." "Well, did you discover anything about yourself that was different than before?" Lin Sanjiu could not resist asking. Ah. Different than before? I didn't. What are you referring to?" Kong Yun seemed astonished as she knocked her spoon against her bowl. "Maybe, her active skills have not been developed." Lin Sanjiu thought it through. If they were to explain to her about new worlds, post-humans, and that sort of thing, it would be more convincing after Kong Yun developed active skills. Consequently, she smiled, "It's nothing. It is a long story, we will tell you some other time. Anyway, what plans do you have later?" Kong Yun immediately replied without a shred of hesitation, "I will go back home to wait for my husband. I will wait for him until he returns. If he comes back and doesn't see me, he will be anxious. That's right, let's eat a little faster. I want to show you my husband's photo later. If you meet him outside, please remember to tell him to go home to look for me." From her words, she did not seem aware that if she waited on, without food and water, she would only die in the end. Perhaps, it wasn't that she was unaware, but rather because she was willing to take the risk even if there were only a thin thread of hope. The atmosphere at the dining table suddenly became heavy. After quite a while, Lin Sanjiu finally said, "Okay, if you are running low on food, we will bring some up for you." She did not want to shatter the woman's only pillar of support so quickly. Losing one's hope was akin to the cruel climate outside, it was similarly fatal to a person. Kong Yun thanked her gratefully. They finished the small pot of porridge very quickly. After Kong Yun's explanation, the 3 of them gathered their things and followed her downstairs. There were 2 households on each subsequent floor after the penthouse. As the other apartment on the 26th floor had always been empty, Kong Yun left her door unlocked when she left. It simply opened when she just gave it a push. When the 3 of them entered her apartment, they were suddenly stunned. At that moment, the apartment, which was elegantly decorated, was very bright. There were many stylish candelabra all over the large and small surfaces in the room, such as the dining table, coffee table, and flower stand. Each of the candelabra held several cream-colored candles. The lights from the orange flames and a faint fragrance flooded the entire living room. It was like as beautiful as a dreamscape and was scorchingly hot like a nightmare. Surrounded by the candle light, Kong Yun smiled bashfully as tears welled up in her eyes. My husband bought these candles for our wedding anniversary. When I came home that day, the apartment was filled with candles. He even cooked for me. Her voice was caught in her throat. She gathered her hair and searched for a few photo frames as if nothing had happened. After the anniversary, he wanted to throw away the candles. I vehemently disagreed. And look, now it came handy. Kong Yun sniffled as she tearfully passed Lin Sanjiu a photo. The man in the photo was average looking, his smile was very gentle, and his teeth were white. Ah! Lin Sanjiu exclaimed before she said, I have the impression that I met your husband before, just once downstairs. Lin Sanjiu explained that she remembered him because, at that time, there was an extremely furious woman over the line with him. The woman screamed about something continuously and was so loud that she could be heard even over the phone. After Lin Sanjiu had said this, Kong Yun's tears poured down uncontrollably. We had a quarrel that day. I really regret it. If I knew that we will part, I would never shout at him. He is such a gentle person. Marcy tapped lightly on Kong Yun's shoulder and sighed. Luther sat silently on a chair. Just like any man, he did not know what to do when it comes to crying women. After saying a few comforting words to Kong Yun, Lin Sanjiu stood up, and her eyes swept the apartment aimlessly. Suddenly, she frowned, feeling a little suspicious. Looking carefully, there was something weird about the apartment. The water dispenser in the living room was empty, but there was a full bottle of water right beside it. It was as if the owner did not find it necessary to refill the water dispenser. The owner might not be thirsty, yet the fish tank was empty. There were only a layer of ornamental rocks and a dry, tiny treasure chest in it. When she walked over, there was still a strong fishy smell. The weirdest thing were the potted plants in the apartment, or rather, just pots filled with soil that should have plants in them. The plants were all missing, and there were holes in the soil where they once were. She could even see a few strands of roots. A sudden flash of thought ran through her mind. I'll get a drink for you. Do you have any drinks in your fridge? Lin Sanjiu hurried to the fridge before she asked Kong Yun abruptly. Before she even received a reply, she pulled open the fridge door. The fridge compartments were almost empty. There were only a few plastic wraps scattered about, those which were used in supermarkets to wrap vegetables. One even had the price tag on: premium organic carrots, $14.98. At the left compartment of the fridge, there was a neat row of drinks. Lin Sanjiu was certain from one look, the drinks have never been touched by anyone. Only at that moment did she hear Kong Yun's slightly anxious voice coming from behind her. No, it's okay. I am not thirsty. Thank you. Lin Sanjiu closed the fridge door and turned to look at the hand that Marcy had placed on Kong Yun. She felt like there was a heavy rock in the pit of her stomach. Chapter 16, We Found Your Husband. Marcy, Lin Sanjiu controlled her facial muscles and tried her best to sound amiable. Can you come over here? I want to ask if you have seen my little silver bottle. Bringing up that little silver bottle, Marcy immediately thought of the ability polishing agent. Marcy did not move from the spot. She was baffled and just replied, I placed it on the sofa, didn't I? As she said this, she was still patting Kong Yun's back. As they left with Kong Yun, they had no choice but to leave the ability polishing agent upstairs. Lin Sanjiu also knew about that. Lin Sanjiu suddenly knitted her brows. I've forgotten. She turned to face Kong Yun, saying, blame it all on my bad memory. Can I bring the both of them upstairs with me? Older sister Kong, is it okay if you wait here for a moment? Kong Yun was stunned for a moment. Lin Sanjiu knew that she, herself, was acting quite abnormally, so she did not give Kong Yun even the chance to reply. She pulled Luther to the entrance and gestured for Marcy to follow. Come, we can also see if there are other useful supplies. Marcy still had a doubtful look, but she stood up and complied. Older sister Kong, don't be afraid. We will come back here soon, Lin Sanjiu said with a smile and pulled open the front door. Through the little opening before the door closed, Lin Sanjiu saw Kong Yun sitting in the living room, looking back at her expressionlessly. When the front door closed with a bang, her face was enveloped by the darkness. Just as the door was closed shut, Lin Sanjiu turned and sprinted upstairs. The two others were confused but followed her quickly. Luther was the first one to react. He murmured, "What's the matter? Did you find something amiss?" I hope that I overanalyzed it." Her words came out in bits as she vigorously climbed up the stairs with wide strides. "I must go upstairs to confirm something first." Within a few minutes, the three of them used their full stamina to reach the top floor. Lin Sanjiu's heart pounded hard. Without taking any time to steady her breathing, she pushed open the door and rushed into the 38th floor apartment. The room was pitch dark. "Give me the lighter," Lin Sanjiu shouted. Hearing her, Luther threw over the lighter and with a click, she lit it in her hand. The orange light from the flame lit half the dining area dimly. There were 4 bowls on the dining table. Luther and Marcy looked at each other and could not help looking at the area that Lin Sanjiu had illuminated. Huh! Marcy spotted the oddity quicker than Luther. Why didn't she? Previously, they ate in the dark and left immediately, so no one realized anything strange. Now that they looked carefully, they discovered that there was something wrong. There were messy piles of chicken bones and skins beside 3 of the bowls. But beside Kong Yun's bowl, there was nothing. Well, this is nothing new. Maybe she likes to eat chicken bones. Just as Luther was about to say this, he saw Lin Sanjiu's serious expression as she brought Kong Yun's bowl closer to them. He scanned it and immediately swallowed his words. In this scathingly hot hyperthermal hell, even post-humans like themselves were constantly in a state of mild dehydration. This was the reason that they had to appropriately drink water every now and then. Even though they had decided to settle down at the supermarket, each drop of water was extremely precious to them. Naturally, they drank up all the porridge soup before. However, there was still half a bowl of shimmering white broth in Kong Yun's bowl. When she checked with a spoon, Lin Sanjiu found that there wasn't a single grain of rice left and all the chicken had also been eaten. Only the most precious thing in this new world, water, was left totally untouched by Kong Yun. Why doesn't she need to drink? Luther frowned as he bit his lip so tightly that there was a mark. Lin Sanjiu had a grim expression. Thanks to her keen senses, she managed to piece the random fragments of clues together. But if her intuition was right, Kong Yun was a thornier problem than any Duoluashong. Lin Sanjiu said each word quietly. She lied. She definitely already developed one active skill, and the way things are, I roughly know what her ability is. The chicken meat, the rice, the plants, the goldfishes, and the vegetables in the fridge. After she had placed the bowl down, her gaze fell on both Luther's and Marcy's faces. She said with some seriousness, "It is very likely that Kong Yun's ability is that she can convert all forms of biological material into the nutrients that she needs for survival. I guess that she only has to touch her target and she can rapidly absorb it entirely without a single trace. How much time did we spend eating? Yet, it now seems as if the chicken and rice never even existed in the first place." With the SSS sound, Marcy gasped. All forms of biological material? Absorption by contact? This isn't just an ability for survival. If it is used in combat, one would die if they were touched. But that doesn't explain why she doesn't have to drink water. Luther's face turned white as he recalled how they bumped into each other when they were going downstairs. Could it be that her ability altered her body, so she is unable to intake water like us? Maybe, for her, she can only obtain the required nutrients and fluids from the absorption of biological materials. Marcy suggested. We had spent almost half a day with her. If she had any ill will, we wouldn't be alive now. Lin Sangio nodded her head. This was what she thought of and hoped for as well. But she feared. The thought just came to her mind, but before she had the time to express herself, Kong Yun's voice rang out in the darkness, "Why do you need such a long time to just grab something?" The three of them froze. Did they take that long? Lin Sangio could not help looking at the time on her digital watch. They spent only 10 minutes from the time they came upstairs. She could not tell what Kong Yun's purpose was for following them so closely. Noticing that the two others were silent and just standing blankly, Marcy quickly raised her voice and called over, "Wait for us at the door. We will come out soon." Kong Yun replied with an "oh," but she continued walking toward them as if she did not hear Marcy. She slowly dragged her feet and stepped into the apartment. The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. Pausing for 2 seconds, Marcy laughed, "Hey, we are leaving now, you didn't have to come in." Kong Yun said softly, "I am scared to be on my own. I just want to be with you guys, will you mind?" While she said this, she walked closer to the three of them and revealed a smile. She stretched out her hand and held onto Marcy's arm. Lin Sangio's heart leaped. Just when she was about to intervene, Luther, who was standing behind her, had already pulled Marcy away from Kong Yun with one quick movement. He was so fast that she could only see a dark shadow. Marcy only managed to steady herself when Luther growled out, "What do you want?" His anger made his voice tremble a little. This was the first time Lin Sangio witnessed that fair, handsome young man getting angry. "You already developed your abilities long before, right? We already know this. Tell us. Why are you following us?" Kong Yun seemed slightly startled. She could not react for a moment. After a while, she said, sounding troubled, "There is really something wrong with my body. I did not dare to tell all of you because I was afraid that you will be scared of me." "So all of you actually knew?" Marcy looked at her, guardedly. Trying to get a confirmation, she asked cautiously, "You didn't mean us any harm, right?" Lin Sangio instantly shot her a look. Marcy was nice and everything, but she could be too trusting sometimes. If Kong Yun really planned something, would she honestly say that out? "Harm all of you." Kong Yun paused. The words she said next was beyond Lin Sangio's expectation. "No, no, no. I just need one of you. It will be too cruel to absorb all three of you." The sentence was like a stop button, and everything froze. Seeing their shocked face seemed to have hardened Kong Yun's heart. She sighed and continued, "Actually, I really don't want to absorb any living being. But I feel weak. I have absorbed everything in my house and even those security guards downstairs, but I still feel weak, so weak that it is uncomfortable." Lin Sangio could not decide if she should be angry or she should laugh. Probably because she saw Lin Sangio's expression, Kong Yun wiped her own tears. "When I first saw all of you, I did not have that intention. But as time went on, I couldn't resist. Ask yourselves truthfully, if taking another person's life mean that you can survive, would you do it?" She did not actually plan to listen to their answers and instead lifted one finger. She said, almost as if pleading, "I will just absorb one of you, really. Just one." "Marcy, Luther, didn't both of you just met her yesterday? She is just a passing acquaintance." There was an almost deranged smile on her face. "Without this girl, both of you can go on living your lives the way you wanted to, it wouldn't be a loss. You really did plan this out well for us." Lin Sangio smiled coldly without looking at Luther's and Marcy's expressions. She only felt a brewing fire of anger in her heart. Hearing this, Kong Yun turned to look at her. "Lady, I don't see your boyfriend beside you. I figured both of you were just playing around. You won't understand the feelings between my husband and me. I must not die. Even if everyone dies, I must not die. I will wait for my husband at home." Luther could not stand listening to her anymore and retorted, "Enough of your bullsh*t. If you want to eat someone, go back home and eat yourself." Lin Sangio felt a sense of relief, and she quickly smiled at the two of them. When she was about to face Kong Yun again, her eyes stopped at her own bedroom door. In the dark, the door seemed so black as if it was a part of the entire universe. Behind the door was a double bed. Instantaneously, a flash of thought pierced through her mind. Before Lin Sangio was aware, she already asked the question, "Kong Yun, you mentioned that when you woke up last night, only his pajamas was left on the bed." "Yes." Why did Kong Yun did not finish her sentence, and her face immediately turned as white as a sheet when she saw Lin Sangio's expression. Lin Sangio smiled vengefully, showing her white teeth. She stared at Kong Yun's face. "Bingo! We found your husband." Chapter 17, Hot on the Heels. Just about then, you unconsciously activated your ability. In that daze you unwittingly absorbed your husband. When you became clear-headed, obviously only his pajamas was left behind. Lin Sangio's cold voice reverberated in the dark room. Toward the woman who was now sitting on the floor, Lin Sangio dreaded and feared her ability. How powerful is her ability? In that short time that she was in a daze, she actually managed to absorb an entire full-grown man? She did not even leave a strand of hair. Kong Yun stared blankly into the air. She had a weird expression. She looked as though she was about to cry or laugh. Just as her expression turned malevolent as she managed a ha, but her tears fell anyway. Nonsense. What do you know? You only said that because you don't want me to absorb you. So you're spouting nonsense. Really? Then, let me ask you a question. When you woke up, did you still feel thirsty? Lin Sangio challenged softly. This sentence was the last straw which broke the camel's back. It totally devastated Kong Yun. Suddenly, Kong Yun let out a shrill cry. The others were so shocked that they could not help retreating backward. Thereafter, she buried her face in her arms and curled up on the ground. She rocked her body gently as if she was comforting herself as she started crying loudly. I don't know." Kong Yun screamed and cried at the same time. Her face was covered in tears, and her words were muffled and unclear. "Everyone said that I was too good for him. But in fact, he was too good for me, too good. He was such a nice person, such a nice." Her cries sounded like fabric being torn. It was filled with deep wrath and pain, so much so that one could not help feeling fearful and uneasy when they heard it. "Why are you still just standing there?" Suddenly, she felt her arm being pulled. She turned her head to find that it was Marcy. Marcy whispered, "Let's take this chance to get away. Do you want to wait for her to regain her composure and absorb you?" Lin Sangio only regained her senses then. It turned out that Luther, with a tensed look on his face, had pressed his body against the soft and already crept step by step out of the living room. When he saw that the two of them were still standing at the same stop, he was seriously mad at them. He hurried-mouthed, "Are you too stupid?" The two of them hastened their steps and slipped past Kong Yun. The latter seemed to have forgotten where she was, while she wailed heedless to the things around her. Her 10 fingers dug deep into the sofa. She made several deep holes in the sofa's soft material and was absolutely ignorant to the movements of the people near her. Just like that, under the sound of her anguished cries, the few of them escaped quietly and sprinted downstairs. After heart-stoppingly nervous situation, their trip back to the supermarket was a contrastingly less eventual journey. They jogged all the way back to the road in front of the shopping mall. They swiftly moved through the queue of cars, walking speedily between the cars. The scurry of footsteps woke up the dying people who were in their cars. When their group walked past the cars, quite a few people in the cars managed to sit up, pounding powerlessly on their car windows in despair. Even though they were alive, their expressions were not different from the dead, without a single spark of life. Lin Sanjiu looked at them with sympathy. Within the 10 overarms behind those car windows, she wondered how many of them could survive until they successfully evolved. Wait. Luther, who had been leading them, suddenly stopped. He turned to instruct Marcy, "Keep a lookout on the road, make sure that Kong Yun is not following us. Xiaoju, hand me your knife." With a white flash, Lin Sanjiu handed him her chef's knife and asked puzzledly, "What's wrong?" Luther tilted his head to the white Volkswagen Bora, his face stiffened. "Look at that, that person is going to change into a Duoluazhong soon." Following where Luther gestured to, Lin Sanjiu felt a layer of goosebumps rising. A dark brown face was pressing tightly against the windscreen of the Volkswagen Bora. It was impossible to tell its gender. Most of its moisture had already evaporated, leaving only a layer of wrinkly skin which piled at the two sides of its cheek. Its mouth area was protruding out as if a mouthpart would burst through its skin any moment. One of its eyelids had already fallen off, and the other eyelid swayed as it hung down precariously over one of its eyeballs. The pair of white eyeballs were staring motionlessly at the three of them. Holding his breath, Luther cautiously walked toward the side of the car. The eyeballs within the car also swirled to look at his side. Crash, with a shattering sound, the car window by the driver's seat was smashed in. Following shortly, even before the person in the car could react, Luther struck and thrust the knife into the brain of that half-man half-Duoluazhong. The process was as quick as lightning, and before Lin Sanjiu even had the time to respond, she heard a rasping, guttural sound and the body in the car slipped back wearily into the seat. After he casually cleaned the knife on the shirt of the corpse, he walked back and returned Lin Sanjiu her knife. Seeing her frowning, conflicted face, Luther could only sigh. "I know that it is uncomfortable for you, but we can't just leave it like that, right?" Lin Sanjiu nodded her head and kept the knife. Even though that person still had the visage of a human figure, it was obvious that the person could not be saved. Apparently, she had better try to get used to such a scene in the future. While Lin Sanjiu continued forward with her wide strides again, she tried to stomach the waves of disgust that she felt. It was quite different from killing in self-defense after all. They did not know if Kong Yun was too overwhelmed by grief, but she appeared not to chase after them. The three of them ran into the supermarket, shocked but unharmed, and they quickly pulled down the metal shutter. Only after they locked the shutter from inside, did Lin Sanjiu slid to the ground leaning on the shutter, exhaling a deep breath. Marcy grabbed a few bottles of water and handed out a bottle to each of them. She took out the ability polishing agent that she did manage to retrieve previously and placed it on one of the shelves beside them, using it for lighting. Who would have known? It was much stronger than the candles. A corner of the supermarket was lit up as if there was a fluorescent light there. After resting for a few minutes, Lin Sanjiu's mind could not help drifting back to the piece of paper. "So, the item that we found just now." As she said this, she pulled out the piece of paper. Suddenly, the two remaining people also focused their concentration on that piece of paper. The handwriting on the paper could clearly be seen under the silver light. As what she saw was too mind-blowing, Lin Sanjiu inadvertently crushed the sides of the paper. Visa. Place of issue, Black Death City. Valid destination, Hyperthermal Hell. Valid from, 6 months prior to the descent of Hyperthermal Hell. This visa was issued by the consular officer of Black Death City. Despite looking at it once before, Lin Sanjiu was still dumbfounded. She passed the visa over to Luther and Marcy. Both of them were also filled with perplexity. "I don't understand. When we came here, we did not have any visa, but we could enter this place anyway," Luther muttered several times repetitively. He flipped over the visa multiple times, examining it. "If we think it through carefully, Your situation was different from his. Lin Sanjia paused, seemingly to think. You had to wait for a full 14 months before you could enter another mutated dimension, but when Ren Nan came here to my world, it was still normal. Its mutation had not even started. Apparently, a visa could not only assign a destination, but it could also allow a person to travel to a dimension before it mutates. Marcy pointed at the line journey performed at the back of the visa. She explained softly, Ren Nan definitely came here with this visa. Both of you have never heard anything about such a thing like this visa? Lin Sanjia pressed on with her questions unrelentingly even though it seemed hopeless. Both of them shook their heads as expected. Luther laid the visa on the ground, staring at it, saying bitterly, if we knew there was such a thing, we wouldn't have to wake up to an exploding bomb the previous time. That made sense. Lin Sanjia lowered her head, her heart was filled with an incomprehensible feeling. If we first ignore how that man with the surname Ren got the visa, just imagine the advantages of entering a dimension 6 months before. Luther clicked his tongue, speaking to Lin Sanjia, you can start making all sorts of preparation when it is still peaceful. Be it supplies, or body training, your chance of survival will far succeed the original inhabitants of that world. That's true. But I think that this sort of visa is much more useful for Ren Nan. No matter how well we prepare, we cannot guarantee that everything will work out. However, with his ability, he could gain a lot more potential growth value in the 6 months. As she thought about the past disorienting half a year, a cold self-deprecating smile appeared on Lin Sanjia's face. Luther sighed and patted Lin Sanjia's shoulder to show his comfort in a seemingly matured manner. I wonder how he got the visa. Even if we wanted to find out, there is no one we can ask. Marcy was still fiddling with the paper obstinately. He doesn't have many items, so I don't think he had been to many places. Luther's eyes suddenly brightened, and he said, smiling, if we can find the consular officer of hyperthermal hell, maybe we can survive together. We don't have split up when we get transported to another world. Struggling through the infinite number of apocalyptic world, everyone comes and goes like drifting duckweed on water. This is indeed a troubling matter. It was a rare opportunity to meet someone that one can share a good rapport with. If they can become companions, it can't get any better. The problem they had was finding the consular officer. All three of them had this same thought. Lin Sanjia was just about to speak when they heard a neither light nor heavy knock on the door. You all must be inside, right? Why don't you open the door? Kong Yun still had that nasally hoarse voice that one has after bawling, but her tone was a lot calmer. Chapter 18, A Happy Blessing for Lin Sanjia. The three of them did not say a single word. They stood up silently as they raised their guard. Kong Yun's question echoed softly through the spacious supermarket, and before it faded, there was another furious knock. This time, she even raised her voice, come here and open the door. I know you all are in there. That rice, didn't you get that here? Open up. That's right, she lived nearby, so she probably shopped here frequently. That was the reason she was able to recognize the source of that sack of imported rice. Before the three of them could think of anything to reply to her, they did not expect that her shouting successfully managed to rouse Wang Sisi, who was in the staff room. After an ear-piercing hiss, bangs resonated in the air as she slammed herself violently against the door. Lin Sanjia could not tolerate this any longer. She suddenly walked towards the metal shutter. Somehow, Wang Sisi's voice seemed to have startled Kong Yun. There were a few seconds of silence outside the metal shutter. After waiting for a while, Lin Sanjia restrained her anger and asked, what the hell do you want? Is that the lady from upstairs? Kong Yun shot back. Why did you follow us here? What do you want? Lin Sanjia shouted loudly, do you think I will just obediently let myself be absorbed by you, just like your husband? Kong Yun, who stood at the other side of the shutter, fell silent for a moment. After her pause, her faint voice finally traveled through the metal shutter, I actually just want to talk. Honestly, I have to thank you. Lin Sanjia bit her lip without saying a word. If you had not enlightened me, I would have just continued waiting. Without anyone around for me to absorb, I would die in the end. On the other hand, I really hate you. Kong Yun sounded unstable, the volume of her voice fluctuated greatly, it was difficult to listen to her. My hope was ripped away from me by a young woman like you who knew nothing. I am suffering, really. Who are you to tell me that I killed him? I can't stand it. I, I really want to kill you so that I can feel a little better. Lin Sanjia was stunned. She could not help taking half a step back. Even though there was a metal shutter between them, she could almost smell the abnormal aura of insanity in the air. Kong Yun, on the side, began to speak again. Forget it. You wouldn't understand. It doesn't make a difference whether you open the shutter or not. If you don't open the shutter, I will just converse with you. If you open them, I will turn your bones into juice and drink that. Lin Sanjia was so affected that her face turned white. She was about to open her mouth, but Kong Yun continued as if she knew that the person on the other side was about to respond. Listen carefully, I will only say this once. I can only use my ability every once in an hour. For me, a living organism is more beneficial than a dead one. And a human being is by far more beneficial for me than any other living creature. When I am absorbing my prey, and I must not move in that 10 minutes. Whether it is on my own violation or forced, if I move, all my efforts will be wasted. I will have to wait for the next hour to start absorbing again. But now at my initial stage, I need to absorb a large amount, so I can't risk the situation of not absorbing anything for a few hours. From this perspective, it meant that Kong Yun was only trying to drag time after she ate the chicken porridge. Ah! Marcy suddenly exclaimed, realizing something. That was why you did not lay a hand on us just now. It is not that you didn't want to, but you did not have the chance. If the others realized that something was wrong, you would have exposed yourself and waste another hour. Once she said this, Luther softly but clearly swore a string of vulgarities. That's right, even though she could not see Kong Yun's face, Lin Sanjia did not know why, but she felt that Kong Yun was smiling at this point. Originally, I wanted to wait for one of you to fall behind, but I did not expect things to turn out like this. How generous of you to reveal everything about your ability, Lin Sanjia remarked sarcastically with a cold smile, but only half believed her words. So what if I told you this? The worst outcome is that I'll die. Kong Yun's intonation rose. Do you think I am afraid of death? If you kill me, I will meet my husband. I should be thanking you then. Lin Sanjia was shocked. She was about to speak when Wang Sisi, who was in the staff room behind her, started howling again. The inhuman howl sounded very intimidating. It became silent for a moment outside the metal shutter, before Kong Yun spoke again. What's that? It's nothing. Lin Sanjia did not want to tell Kong Yun anything about Duoluozong's, probably, someone dying soon. Despite knowing that she was lying, Kong Yun still laughed. Fine, let's hope that we never meet again. She was surprisingly blunt. After she had said that, they could hear her footsteps changing direction. She climbed the escalator, and gradually, her footsteps faded into the distance. Lin Sanjia tried her best to steel herself just now, but after she had heard that woman leave, she finally gave a sigh of relief. The three of them walked back to the area where they had laid out the towels. Lin Sanjia wiped her face, then laid on her bed lethargically. Wang Sisi's howling continued, but the three of them seemed to have gotten used to it. After they had discussed for a while about Kong Yun, somehow Marcy and Luther came to the subject on logistics. The two of them discussed for a short moment before deciding to gather the remaining food and water so that they could check the numbers. Both of you, go ahead. Lin Sanjia's heart and body were weary. She did not feel like moving at all. She waved her hands saying, let me be lazy for a while. Don't worry. That woman can't do anything to you. Marcy thought that she was still concerned about Kong Yun, so she smiled and patted her head. After that, she stood up and left with Luther. The ability polishing agent glowed brightly in the tiny bottle, and the surroundings were lit up with a swirling silver light. If Wang Ceci's banging and howling didn't spoil that atmosphere, it was actually considerably peaceful. After laying for a while, Lin Sanjiu found that her mind was crowded with a lot of Thing Ren Nan, the new world, her own abilities, her dead parents, Zhu Mei, Kong Yun, these things floating in her mind, one after the other, almost suffocating her. If she had discovered this earlier, she would rather find something to do. Lin Sanjiu tossed around a few times before she finally jumped up frustratedly. She decided to look for the other two people and help check their inventory of supplies. To her surprise, once she left the ground, she felt a warm flow traveling from her head to her feet. In that split second, Lin Sanjiu felt all her muscles twitching, her blood rushing through her blood vessels like crazy, and her teeth even started to chatter. She had never experienced this before. It was strange, as though she had lost control of her body. A low cry escaped her throat uncontrollably. Coincidentally, Wang Ceci had stopped at that moment. Her voice immediately traveled through the supermarket. Almost immediately, Marcy hastily asked, "What's wrong?" Lin Sanjiu wanted to open her mouth to say something, but she totally could not control her muscles and her tongue. Her ears were only filled with the sound of her teeth, which chattered rapidly. "We'll go over," Luther yelled out. The footsteps of the two of them approaching sounded very distant and indistinct to Lin Sanjiu. She only felt Marcy's cold breath when the two of them were kneeling beside her. What's the matter?" Luther sounded very anxious, her face. No, her whole body. "What's happening?" At that moment, Lin Sanjiu was just like a large piece of human-shaped jelly. She was trembling non-stop under some sort of external force. Her skin, hair, and muscle vibrated like water ripples. After almost a full minute, this weird vibration gradually faded away. Her body slowly calmed down. When Lin Sanjiu opened her eyes, she saw two large faces, looking very closely at her with worried expressions. What happened to me just now?" She pinched her own skin bewilderedly. The tight, delicate skin which belonged to a young woman like herself looked so normal. Her muscles, bones, and blood also reverted back. Luther and Marcy looked at each other, feeling a little at a loss. "Let me draw your blood, I will help you check," Marcy said as she extended her nails and gave Lin Sanjiu a tiny scratch. Lin Sanjiu had the same idea. She looked nervously as her second drop of fresh blood disappeared into Marcy's palms. Maybe it was because she already collected some base figures, so they only had to wait nervously for about 20 minutes before Marcy opened her eyes. She looked at Lin Sanjiu, and her lips curled up. A few smiling crow's feet appeared at the corner of her eyes. "Xiaoju, congratulations, you have a happy blessing, one." With a pshhh sound, Luther, who was standing beside, drinking a bottle of water, spurted water out from his mouth, wetting Lin Sanjiu's hair and face. Lin Sanjiu's vision darkened, her face was totally white. She did not even bother to wipe the drops of water on her eyelashes. "That's not possible." "Why not?" "This is the natural order of thing." As she was puzzled, Marcy's smile somewhat faded. She looked at both Luther and Lin Sanjiu. Isn't it a happy blessing now that she has developed her third passive skill? She could not understand when she saw the jaw-dropping expression that the two of them had. And her third passive skill is a high-tiered physical enhancement ability. "Hey, what are you doing? Wait. Luther, why aren't you stopping her?" "Hey. It hurts." Chapter 19, Who Moved My Corpse Mountain? The tangerine yellow sun rays were already shining down on the last two steps of the escalator. The strong sunlight was like an eraser. It erased all the darkness from the spaces and revealed the original color of every object. As the sunlight reached her light amber eyes, Lin Sanjiu narrowed her eyes slightly, surviving in the dark for 48 hours, She could not really adapt to the sudden presence of sunlight. Aside from the brightness, the surrounding temperature was unmistakably rising rapidly. The heat wave engulfed Lin Sanjiu as though it was going to eat her up alive. For a moment, she almost felt as if her blood was starting to boil. If she had not suddenly attained her overall physical enhancement passive skill last night, there was a high possibility that she would not survive the way back. It was said that such an ability would modify one's body to a large extent. Lin Sanjiu was beginning to slightly believe that now. She blinked her eyes a few times, trying her best get accustomed to the high-definition vision that her third ability provided. On the ground, not too far from them, she saw the fully detailed splatters of sepia blood stains, dirt stains, putrid pus, and chunks of flesh. She had just knitted her brows together, not having enough time to process the feeling of disgust, when he suddenly realized the implication of the scene in front of her. Lin Sanjiu's eyes widened instantly. She exchanged looks with Luther, who standing beside her. The two of them took a deep breath simultaneously. Today, they came up to clear away the corpses. Since yesterday, the pile of corpses which was just by the escalator had started to give off this funky stench. It was akin to having a rotting cadaver on one's doorstep. If there were a sudden outbreak of contagion due to this, they wouldn't be spared even with their enhanced bodies. That was why Lin Sanjiu decided to come upstairs to burn the heap of corpses under the glaring heat of the sun. Yet, now the two of them found themselves a little confounded. The bloodstains and chunks of flesh were undeniable there, but those were the only remnants left at that spot which once housed that mountain of corpses. Those bodies, Luther muttered as he walked a few steps forward, not noticing that the soles of his shoes were now in a dirty, smelly puddle of fluid. Don't tell me Kong Yun absorbed all the dead bodies here last night. Even though Kong Yun mentioned that living organisms were more beneficial to her than dead ones, but who knows if she was swayed when she saw that readily available pile of corpses and absorbed them all. Lin Sanjiu scanned the area a few times as her face got whiter and whiter. She whispered, "It's not her." "Huh? How can you be sure?" "There are a few reasons. Firstly, there were no less than 20 to 30 dead bodies here. It has only been over 10 hours from the time she appeared here last night till this morning. She doesn't have enough time. Secondly, she can absorb the corpses entirely, but what about their clothes? Where are all the clothes on those bodies?" Lin Sanjiu forced herself to calm down, restraining herself from looking at the streets outside. From the large glass doors of the shopping mall, it was easy to see the same car queue that jammed up the road in front of it. Thirdly, take a look outside. Luther squinted his eyes and looked into the cars in the queue using his eagle eyes. He figured out what Lin Sanjiu meant almost immediately. Last night, when they walked through the lines of cars, there were still quite a few people banging on their car windows, requesting for their help to reach here. But now, the cars were all empty. There wasn't even a single person left. Some of the car windows have been shattered, and some others had their doors opened. At a glance, Luther noticed a gray men's shirt and a pair of jeans on the road. One of its sleeves was folded upwards while the other downwards. It was as though the owner froze on the spot when he was still wearing that shirt. Luther had an impression of that outfit. Last night, they were still worn by a young man with a fashionable hairstyle. They overlooked this indeed. A whole street packed full with cars, and there was at least a single living person in most of the cars. To Kong Yun, this must be no different from an all-you-can-eat buffet. Luther shuddered for a moment. Even if he had seen a countless number of dead bodies, he could not help feeling creeped out by it. Lin Sanjiu scolded a vulgarity, uncharacteristically. "I really didn't see that coming." She was actually so one live person per hour. She actually had the heart to do this. "Let's go out later to see if there are any other survivors. We can decide what we should do then. Otherwise, if we just leave them outside, I am worried that Kong Yun might come here again tonight," Lin Sanjiu said vexingly. After responding with a sigh, Luther frowned and took his glance away from the scene. He tried not to think about how Kong Yun tricked each of the drivers or passengers in the car one by one to open their doors and forced himself to focus on the strange phenomenon in front of him. That's weird. If it wasn't the work of Kong Yun, where did the dead bodies go? I don't know too. Lin Sanjiu had an unpleasant look on her face. She paced around the area but couldn't find anything. Who will waste their time and energy to move those corpses away for nothing? Luther followed her and paced around. Just as he was about to ask Marcy to come upstairs to take a look, he heard a squeak under his feet. He suddenly lost his balance. In his panic, he tried to maintain his balance in a fluster, but his feet was too slippery. With a pack sound, his whole body fell on the puddle of foul blood. He immediately groaned in disgust. The culprit which caused his fall slid away into the distance. Lin Sanjiu gave it a sweeping glance and felt her gastric acid churning inside her was a human eyeball which had been half smashed by Luther. Luther saw that as well. He quickly stood up from that rancid-smelling puddle of blood and started coughing, shaking his arms and stomping his feet. From the way he reacted, he must have been totally grossed out. Come on, come on. Stop it. Let's go downstairs and see if we can find some wet wipes so that you clean up yourself, Lin Sanjiu said as she avoided Luther while walking. When she walked to the escalator, she turned back to look at Luther, who was shaking his head like a dog with wet fur. She could not help scolding in a teasing manner, "What the use of shaking like that? Let's just go back, huh?" The latter half of her sentence stopped as if she stepped on the brakes of a car. She stood motionless, seemingly startled. Luther, who was almost soaked in corpse's fluid, couldn't help taking notice of her sudden peculiar behavior. "What's wrong? What are you doing?" Lin Sanjiu did not say a word. She lifted her finger pointing to a distance, upward. Perplexed, Luther followed the trajectory of her finger, still unable to figure out what was wrong. The rays of the sun seeped down like melted gold from the high glass ceiling on the top floor. A white reflection covered the floor tiles, the green leaves of the plants and the gold-plated door handles of various shops, just like echoes of the sunlight. Items made of plastic melted in the day and hardened overnight, forming a collection of odd sculptures. At first glance, it was just like a modern art museum. If it wasn't for the murderous temperature, the scenery was considerable fascinating, yet what was wrong with it? After looking at it once more, he suddenly exclaimed, "Ah!" He only realized it now, his face was suddenly filled with awe. Why is it totally unharmed? It refers to the 5 stories high tropical forest featured in the center of the shopping mall. Even if those were tropical plants, there wasn't a single plant in the world that could tolerate such high temperatures which could even melt plastic. Despite that, the small swathe of tropical forest in front of them was still dense, green, and full of vitality, as if the hyperthermal hell was just an illusion. It formed a juxtaposition to the trees on the walkway, separated by the glass walls. Each of the tree trunks of the ornamental trees outside was like charcoal, black and dry. All their leaves had fallen to the ground, they gathered in a black patch, and it was almost impossible to tell their original form. Some of the trees on the walkway even broke into 2 because their thin trunks became too dry and brittle to support their weight. Contrasting the two, Lin Sanjiu even thought that the tropical plants in the shopping mall looked even healthier than before. Encountering these 2 weird phenomena one after the other, they really could not come out with any explanation in such a situation. Lin Sanjiu thought for a while and said to Luther, "These plants are really quite a mystery." "That's right, why don't we call Marcy up to look at this? 3 heads are better than 2. Fine. Sigh, I don't find it that strange." Luther did not care much for the few green plants in front of him. Maybe, the glass is special, so it blocks whatever UVA or something like that. Even so, we shouldn't take it lightly. Sure, sure. But can I change out of my clothes first? It is so uncomfortable. Obviously, Luther's focus was still on the smelly fluid that was on him. It was simply too easy for him to change his clothes since the shopping mall lacked no branded stores. Luther looked around for a while, and smiled at Lin Sangio asking, "Do you think I should go for Armani or DG?" Lin Sangio could not stand it any longer. "I hope that as you can still run as quickly wearing an S-sized suit." "Fine, I know." Luther gave a look of resignation, saying that as he climbed up the staircase. Lin Sangio did not want to stay in the area where the corpses mysteriously disappeared, so she followed quickly. "Wait for me." Luther stopped in the middle of the staircase, turning to laugh. "Why? Do you want to look for a few outfits as well? I wanted to say this a long time ago. Why is a beautiful lady like you wearing clothes like you are going to practice Tai Chi? Why does it have to be TAICH? Before she could finish her question, a strong gust of wind followed a long, dark shadow as it attacked the two of them on the staircase at lightning speed. Chapter 20, Lin Sangio's Roundabout Tactics. No one could anticipate this attack. Since that gust of wind was about to reach the top of Luther's head, and he did not have the time to defend himself, he could only roll to the ground. Somehow, he managed to dodge the attack but could not avoid tumbling down the staircase. Luckily, Lin Sangio reacted quickly. She stooped down and grabbed his sleeve, stopping Luther's momentum down the stairs. The attack, which had missed Luther, slammed into the top of the staircase and actually destroyed a segment of the stairs, stirring up a cloud of dust and broken concrete which sent Lin Sangio and Luther into a fit of coughing. Witnessing that, they were a little traumatized. If the attack landed on a person, it would have shaved off half his life. Missing its attack, the black shadow lingered in the air, swaying lightly up and down as if undecided on which prey, underneath, it should attack. Taking advantage of that short frame of time, the two of them finally saw the perpetrator clearly, ultimately solving the riddle about the whereabouts of the mountain of corpses. It was a long, green vine which extended from the tropical forest. No, instead of calling that green, it was closer to a sepia brown. The green vines which spanned over half the shopping mall's central hall were covered with so much blood stains that it was basically impossible to tell their original color. There were even a few pieces of orange fabrics dangling on the thorns of the vines, and with one sweeping look, Lin Sangio was certain that the fabric matched that of the staff uniform for the supermarket downstairs. What the F***ck? How can those things extend so far? Luther touched the abrasion on his face, cursing angrily. Lin Sangio locked her eyes on the green vines, not daring to make any rash movements. It probably grew after it mutated. What should we do now? What else? Let's run back. I don't believe that it can follow us all the way back to the supermarket. The green vine seemed like it had understood what was said, and generated another strong gust of wind. Following which, the few broken slabs of concrete which was stirred into the wind flew toward the two of them. They twisted to their side, dodging them. Lin Sangio stared back at the green vine, biting her lips tightly. Her heart was thumping loudly. That won't work, we have to split up. I will go upstairs, you downstairs. Are you crazy? Luther was astounded and turned, only to find that he was already staring at the back of her head. The corpses were piled just beside the escalator, and the green vines could reach them. That clearly means that we will be attacked throughout the way back. While Lin Sangio explained, she had already picked up a broken concrete slab beside her, aimed and threw it at the green vine in lightning speed. It was as if the vine in mid-air grew eyes. It suddenly shifted upwards, avoiding the slab. Before Luther could react, Lin Sangio shot up the stairs like an arrow while she yelled, "I will attract its attention here. Quick! Tell Marcy to bring some liquor over to rescue me. Get those with a high alcohol content." Within the time it took for her to say that, the vine had already aimed a few consecutive attacks at her. Lin Sangio managed to dodge the first few attacks, but just as she was about to finish climbing the final few steps, she was cut by the last slash of wind. It tore a hole in her pants, and a little blood seeped from her wound. Not caring the least bit about that, Lin Sangio jumped and leaped forward, reaching the second floor at last. She immediately hid behind one of the doors belonging to a store. Luther, who has been staring at her, only felt his heart settling down at this point. He knew what Lin Sanjia was planning. He felt anxious for her but also admired her quick thinking. You are crazy. Take care, Marcy, and I will come back as soon as possible. Leave. It's going for you now. Lin Sanjia yelled as she gave the store's door a kick. The green vine lingered for a moment mid-air. In that half-second, Luther used the full potential of his enhanced body and sprinted toward the escalator like the wind. Seeing that the green vine was almost bent on following him, Lin Sanjia rushed out of the store without delay and threw a promotional board at it. Luther simply did not have the time to turn to look. He could only trust that Lin Sanjia was providing him cover as he ran like mad for the escalator. He rushed down the escalator in a split second and, sure enough, the green vine did not chase after him. He only ran a few steps toward the supermarket when he nearly collided into Marcy. She had heard and realized that something was wrong, so she quickly ran outside. When she saw Luther, she shot him a series of questions. What happened? What was that sound outside? Where is Xiaoju? I have no time to explain, we have to get some liquor. Grab the wines and spirits with high alcohol content. Ignoring the fact that Marcy was still confused, Luther rushed into the supermarket, grabbing some shopping bags on his way and headed for the alcoholic beverage section. Marcy did not know what had happened, but she moved quickly. Before even a full 10 minutes, the two of them were both carrying a few bags of wine. Do you have a lighter on you? Yes. What are we going to burn? Seeing the association between the wine and the lighter, Marcy caught the drift. Luther gave a wry smile. We have to go destroy the greenery. He nodded saying this and ran toward the escalator first. The two of them climbed the escalator alongside each other. Just as they were about to reach the top, Luther suddenly stopped. After he had paused to think for a moment, he decided to peek out cautiously first. It was quiet on the first floor, nothing seemed out of place. The terrifyingly crafty length of vine had already disappeared from the mid-air. The tropical forest in the middle of the mall was just plainly there, as still as before. He could not spot Lin Sanjio as well. He looked upward, but there was no movement on the second floor. If it hadn't been for that damaged segment of stairs, he would have thought that it was just a dream. Marcy stepped closer to him and whispered, "What exactly happened? Where is Xiaoju?" Luther could feel a bitter taste in his mouth as he muttered, "I don't know." After briefing Marcy about the whole incident, Luther felt his heart grew tenser and tenser. If Lin Sanjia messed up, and the green vine successfully attacked her, what should they do if she ended up like that mountain of corpses? After hearing what he said, Marcy also thought of the same possibility. Suddenly feeling too anxious, she unexpectedly raised her voice and shouted, "Xiaoju! Where are you? Please reply." Her voice rang out loudly in the spacious shopping mall, triggering off a series of echoes. Luther was shocked. He quickly looked toward the tropical forest and noticed that the leaves of the tallest few coconut trees in the center started to move. It was practically like how a person turned his head when he heard a sound. Mostly likely because the two of them were still hidden at the escalator, which was the tropical forest's blind spot. Marcy's shouting voice did not attract any attacks. Knowing this, he was relieved. Therefore he joined Marcy and started to shout with Marcy. Both their voices were amplified by the surrounding to such an extent that their voices were almost deafeningly loud. However, Lin Sanjio still did not show her face. The longer they yelled, the more worried they felt. Suddenly, after there was a sound of an opening door, they heard Lin Sanjio's voice coming from an unknown location. "Have you gotten the liquor? I'm all right, don't worry." "Where are you?" Marcy searched hastily for the source of her voice. Probably because of the echoes, Lin Sanjio's voice seemed to come from all directions. "You won't be able to see me. I'm on the 4th story." "Why did you go up there?" Luther asked, puzzled. She should have faced more attacks climbing up, but the staircase up from the second floor was totally intact. I had no choice. Whichever store I hid in, the bloody vine would destroy the entire thing. If I didn't think to hide in the stairways used by the staff, I wouldn't be able to survive till now. Luther only noticed then that the fancy and exquisite storefronts of the branded stores on the second floor have all been destroyed. In any case, he felt relieved after hearing that Lin Sanjia was safe. He really didn't think of that before. Normally, many customers were moving around the shopping mall, and they used the easily visible staircases and escalators. But if the staff had to transport some rubbish or move their cleaning equipment or something, they would not squeeze with the customers, so there was definitely a backup hidden passageway. Lin Sanjia was just lucky to spot that staff passageway. Then, how will you come back to the supermarket? Marcy asked, still feeling deeply worried. It had taken a while before Lin Sanjia's voice rang out again. I reckon that there must be a way to get to the basement from this staff passageway. Don't burn the trees first. I found out just now that the tropical forest is linked to the flower bed on the 5th story. If the entire 5th story gets burned as well, it will be too dangerous. Why don't we do this? Both of you should go back first. We will meet in the basement. Luther and Marcy exchanged looks. They worriedly implored her to be careful before they went back to the supermarket. They put them the full bags of wines and walked around the supermarket uneasily. Other than the back door that was dead bolted, there was no other entrance. It seems that the staff passageway is behind that door. Marcy shook the brass lock on the door. We need to open this door, otherwise, how would she come in later? Luther's head ached when he observed that the back door was also made of durable materials. Even the keys that they got from the dead manager was with Lin Sanjiu, yet the door was locked from inside. There wasn't even a gap at the bottom of the door. Luther walked another around, not wanting to give up. This time he found a suitable weapon. At a nondescript corner, there was a red fire hydrant box. He broke the outer glass with his elbow and found a small hammer. Quick! We can use this to smash open the door. He hurried to the back door, presenting it to Marcy like a treasure. Marcy's knitted brows relaxed a little when she saw the hammer. Luther was stronger than her, so she scowled, signaling for Luther to start hammering. After a few hits, sparks appeared as the hammer hit the lock. Unfortunately, the door did not show even a hint that it was opening. The knocking sounds were amplified multiple times in the cavernous supermarket. Wang Sisi, who seemed to be startled, gave a few sudden shrieks. Just when the two of them were just going to ignore her and continue hammering, they heard a familiar voice, "My God!" I entered the staff room. Chapter 21, Welcome back. The third passive skill that she had developed last night couldn't have been timelier. In the dark, Lin Sanjiu managed to avoid the kitchen knife thrown at her from the staff room with a quick dodge. She silently thanked the heavens. Without her overall physical enhancement ability, she would not have been able to dodge the smelly kitchen knife that Wang Sisi suddenly threw at her, much less the attacks of that crafty and speedy green vine. The kitchen knife fell not far from her and made a clanging sound. In the time that Wang Sisi's attack missed, Lin Sanjiu had already nimbly jumped backward and conveniently closed the door with a bang, blocking other incoming attacks. It was only then that she heard a series of dragging sounds from the other side. After that, she heard the muffled voices of both Luther and Marcy. Through the two doors, Marcy's voice had an unmasked anxiousness. "Xiaoju, are you all right? Try to leave quickly, we do not have the keys to enter." "I am all right. I already came out of the room." Lin Sanjiu replied loudly. "The little desiccated corpse pulled off the knife in its mouthpart and threw that at me just now. But I am unharmed." Wang Sisi hissed angrily as Lin Sanjiu suddenly felt the vibration of the door she was leaning against. It was as if it had been struck violently by something, probably Wang Sisi's mouthpart. Lin Sanjiu took a few steps away from the door hurriedly and quickly relocked the door with her key. After hearing Wang Sisi's frustrated screech, Lin Sanjiu took out the lighter in her pocket and lit it. Ever since her body had been enhanced, her night vision had improved significantly. Even without light, she could see with about 60% to 70% clarity in the dark, so she did not need to look blindly for a light source like a moth. However, that was also the reason why she did not carefully check her surroundings carefully. She was totally focused on returning to the supermarket and ran straight in when she saw a door, and that was how she came face to face with Wang Sisi's deformed face for a brief moment just now. Since she could not return immediately right now, she decided to use the light from her lighter to explore the area. When her eyes swept across the area, Lin Sanjiu promptly held her breath uncontrollably. Just 10 steps away from her, she saw rows of goods shelves which were at least the height of 2 persons. At one glance, the shelves were different from those in the supermarket. They were almost touching the ceiling, and each level on the shelves was filled with properly packaged boxes. She could tell that the majority of the boxes were food and drinks. She suppressed her excitement and jogged to the front of the shelves. She could not help softly touching the boxes of mineral water with her hands. Last night, after her ability was discovered, the 3 of them started from the scratch and counted the amount of food and water they had. They had to concede that what they had left was an aftermath of a pillage. Even though there was quite a significant amount of goods left, but after what they had consumed, there were only enough supplies for another 2 weeks. I was wondering why we couldn't find the warehouse. Lin Sanjiu laughed till her eyes glistened. Speaking to herself, she softly cursed, "So you have been hiding here, with a desiccated corpse guarding the door, no less." When she would go back, she would have to think of a method to store all these things in the warehouse. The bottles of life source wrapped in a pink hard case glowed under the light of the flame. As she saw the full shelf of mineral water, Lin Sanjiu opened a box and took a bottle as she was feeling thirsty. Just then, she heard Marcy's and Luther's voice from the other side of the staff room door once again. "Xiaoju, what are you doing now? Can you think of a way to get back?" "I am okay. I found the supermarket's warehouse," Lin Sanjiu replied. She sat outside the staff room entrance deciding to rest for a while to regain her energy. There were confidence and resilience in her voice as she said, "I will definitely find a way to get back, don't worry." There were a few more muffled sentences from the other side as if the other 2 of them were trying to tell her some instructions, but thereafter there were no other sounds. Lin Sanjiu snapped the lighter shut, and the warehouse returned to its original dark silence. At this time, Wang Sisi must also be thinking of a strategy behind that door, right? Lin Sanjiu thought inwardly as she drank a mouthful of water, enjoying the cool fluid going down her throat. She really could not underestimate that little desiccated corpse. She made a lot of noise and movements when she was pulling out the keys to open the door, but Wang Sisi purposely kept very silent, so Lin Sanjiu totally did not suspect that she was opening the back door of the staff room. If she had not smelled the rotting stench that wafted out once the door opened, she would not have been alert enough to dodge Wang Sisi's attack. Now, the 2 routes back to the supermarket were blocked, similar to how their paths were blocked by the broken-down Land Rover. In the large hall, there was a weird, unpredictable forest. If she chose the path through the staff room, she had to bypass Wang Sisi. In any case, she had to vote for the lesser evil. After she waited for an unknown amount of time, Lin Sanjiu finally made her decision. She stood up silently in the dark and placed her light, water bottle, and other random things aside. She wrung her hands and gave a soft sigh. It was time to test out how powerful her overall physical enhancement ability was. She slotted the key lightly in the keyhole and turned left once. The metal lock made a tiny sound. In the absolute silence, that small sound was so loud that it was shocking. It was impossible that Wang Sisi did not hear it, and almost immediately, as if to prove her right, a chain of goo-goo sounds ranged out. Lin Sanjiu could sense something walking closer. She did not say a word but stealthily turned the door handle. The door slowly opened up a gap that was wide enough for a person. The heavy darkness remained silent, and it was as if even the flow of air had stopped. Almost abrupt, a black shadow suddenly shot out from that gap in a swoosh. It targeted the area right behind the door handle. The speed was too fast, even with her body enhancement, Lin Sanjiu definitely wouldn't be able to dodge it. However, the attack which was supposed to certainly hit missed its target. Huh. Wang Sisi made a human sound after some time. She shook her mouthpart around the door area and realized that Lin Sanjiu had disappeared all of a sudden and was nowhere to be seen. Hesitating for a moment, Wang Sisi walked 2 steps toward the door cautiously. A sweet voice came out from her mouthpart, "Big sister, where are you? Sisi doesn't want to fight with you. Can you just let Sisi go, okay?" Nobody replied her. Outside the half-opened door, it was still that same silent darkness. She could not see Lin Sanjiu's figure or hear any movement. It was like there had never been a person that at all. A hand, so dry that it no longer resembled a human's, peeked from the door as if to push it open. It paused and retreated. After a while, a horrible-looking thing crept out stealthily from the room. That was Wang Sisi. After they had not seen it for days, it had become more shriveled, similar to security guard, its skin now layered on top of each other. Due to Luther's kick, there was a deep impression on its chest, thus even the last human-like vestige was lost. The gap was not wide, but it was sufficient for Wang Sisi. "Big sister. Big sister. I am out. Don't be afraid, okay? Sisi just wants to go home to look for mommy." Its 2 white eyeballs rolled around searching the warehouse, but it couldn't spot Lin Sanjiu at all. It spun its mouthpart nervously. She could smell the scent of a live human's blood, but it could not tell where it was from. This made Wang Sisi, who had not eaten for days, rash and jittery. The childlike voice that was generated from its mouthpart was filled with a sobbing tone, "Big sister, if you don't come out, I will take it as your consent. Sisi is leaving, she is going home." The little girl's voice reverberated in the dark. She stabbed her mouthpart towards the back of the door, the only place that a person could hide. Her mouthpart, which shimmered with a metallic light, stabbed into nothing. "Are you going to suck your mother dry?" A plain, mocking voice came from above her. Wang Sisi was shocked. She immediately looked up. Before she could pull back her mouthpart from the back of the door, a black shadow fell on her. Following that moment, the door trapped her mouthpart. Before Wang Sisi could scream, there was a sudden flash of light above her head, and before she knew it, a chef's knife had penetrated its skull. In an instant, Wang Sisi's body along with its mouthpart fell to the ground with a pack as it lost all its strength. Seeing that the corpse was motionless, Lin Sanjiu gave a sigh of relief. She had been crouching on top of the narrow ledge of the door. She remained silent before choosing an opportunity to jump down from the door. This was an extremely difficult feat. She never imagined that she would be able to execute such ninja-like action sequence before the new world descended. She pinched her nose as she carefully walked past the dead body and went to open the other door in the staff room. As the door opened, the silver light resembling the moonlight, which the ability polishing agent emitted, shined on Lin Sanjiu's entire body. The shelves, used for block the door have already been removed by the 2 other outside. Luther was standing, and Marcy was sitting as they waited quietly for her to return. "Welcome back," Luther greeted cheerily, leaning on the wall, as he held the ability polishing agent in one hand. Chapter 22, Starting a Journey. If one only used their naked eyes to look at the scenery, the intense sun that hung high in the sky was no different from any other summer. The dazzling sunlight shined down from the blue skies and only revealed its unspeakable malice when it blazed over the earth. Shriveled dead bodies covered in burns were found on every single street. Buildings split open under the high heat, and houses made of inferior materials had long disintegrated into small hills of rubble. There were cracks on the ground, and occasionally, one could spot a considerably healthy duoluazhong moving around the ruins. In the short 2 months, The temperature continued rising every day, and on this day, it was as if all traces of humankind had melted under that heat. It was difficult to believe that this was once a highly developed human civilization. The air was dry and hot, no one knew where all that moisture went when the lakes and rivers evaporated. As far as their eyes could see, there was not a single bit of greenery left. Every path that it took, the truck would stir up a thick cloud of yellow dust which reached half the height of an adult, making it difficult to see much at all. Lin Sanjia was sitting in the driver's seat and could not resist taking a look at the rear-view mirror. Right behind her vehicle was a similar type of large goods truck and then another long public bus, but that was not the focus of her gaze. She narrowed her eyes and looked carefully at the thick column of smoke, in the distance, rising to the air. The place where the smoke rose from was exactly the shopping mall which had housed them for a month. After living there for such a long time, they finally had to leave. Lin Sanjia's train of thought involuntarily drifted back to their situation a month before. Back then, Lin Sanjia had unintentionally found the supermarket warehouse which was packed with supplies. They were really ecstatic even without counting. They knew at one glance that the food and water in the warehouse were certainly sufficient for them to survive for 14 months. In addition to that, living in that underground supermarket meant that they did not have to worry about the problem of being under direct sunlight. They could even call it a totally ideal situation. The only problem they had was still that patch of tropical forest in the middle of the mall. Humans coveted for comfort after all. After the few of them had discussed for a while, they considered their situation and concluded that if they were to lock themselves in the supermarket, that abomination of a tropical forest outside should not be able to do anything to them. Since they had experienced a few days of tense, hair-raising incidents, they had used up a lot of their strength. In the name of recuperation, they decided to make the supermarket their home. The recuperation lasted for 2 to 3 weeks. As they did not have to worry about the lack of sustenance, while the shutter door kept out any threats of external enemies, the three of them had the first taste of a somewhat comfortable life in a new world. It was to the extent that after a month, Lin Sanjia found that she became fatter when she randomly pinched her waist. Honestly speaking, the amount of fats wasn't that much, but it instantly evoked in her the image of fattened livestock. During that period of time, she did not develop a single new ability, and her movements had also slowed down considerably. Without any sense of crisis, she had even spent a few days just sleeping in the darkness. If they continued on like this, she knew that it would be detrimental for all of them. After they had discussed about it, they decided that they had to go and patrol the place. Firstly, it was for them to check the situation nearby, and next for them to train themselves. The idea seemed pretty good, but when they opened the metal shutters, the three of them froze. When they pulled open the shutter, it was around 4+ in the afternoon. However, the escalator that led up to the first floor was still shrouded in darkness. Lin Sanjia looked blankly ahead and asked softly, "Does this mean that the sun sets that early now?" Luther was speechless. Suddenly, Marcy pointed upward yelling, "Look!" Lin Sanjia and Luther looked in the direction that she pointed and their guts sunk at once. They observed a sudden slight movement from the portion of darkness that was covering the escalator as if a reaction from a stimulus. The movement wasn't their main concern. A little sunlight immediately seeped in, revealing the underside of the cover, which was an intricate green network of branches, tendrils, and leaves. The three of them finally realized why it was pitch dark outside the metal shutters. It was because the entire area was covered by plants. Subsequently, there were more movements in the shadow. All sort of large and small, densely packed green vines started stirring one by one as if they could smell the scent of a human. They crept slowly toward the metal shutter. They did not know who yelled first, but the three of them did not dare to tarry even for a second. They turned and rushed for the supermarket and pulled the shutters down with a clang. The green vine slammed noisily on the metal shutter. Unexpectedly, multiple bulges appeared on the heavy metal shutter. If they went out a few more times, it certainly wouldn't hold up much longer. Once they returned to the supermarket, there was a grim expression on all their faces. None of them expected that their position would change from them making the decision to isolate themselves from the world to becoming trapped here so quickly. "We can't stay here any longer," Lin Sangio smiled bitterly. "What should we do now? Even if we leave, we have to bring along the supplies from the warehouse," Marcy said, gritting her teeth tightly. "It is not difficult to bring those items with us. We can find a few large trucks outside, and we can try to pack as much as we can. The problem now is how we can actually get out." The only exit had been entirely blocked by those vines, Lin Sangio asked worriedly. The three of them remained silent for a while. Suddenly, Luther exclaimed, "Ah," and leaped up like a rabbit. He turned and ran toward the back of the supermarket, yelling at the same time, "The escalator exit isn't the only way. Xiaoju, bring your keys along. There is still a back door behind." His words reminded Marcy of the same thing. She clapped her hands together, and her face brightened. "That's right. How could I have forgotten?" She pulled Lin Sangio along, following quickly behind Luther. Within a few seconds, they were standing at the back door of the supermarket. Ever since Lin Sangio had appeared in the staff room, Luther and Marcy had both completely forgotten about the back door. This was the first time that Lin Sangio even knew of the existence of this back door, which opened to who knows where. She prayed silently as she opened the door with her key. The heavens were on their side. The door opened to a narrow slope. Walking down the slope, the few of them found themselves beside a row of large rubbish bins. They were standing at the backside of the shopping mall. Apparently, this was the place where the staff washed their equipment and disposed of their rubbish. After they walked further down, they quickly saw a small road. When they looked back into the glass windows at the shopping mall now covered in green vines and plants, for the first time in their lives, they could not understand how that small road covered with cracks could look so cute. They knew what they had to do next. Firstly, they had to look for 3 vehicles. That wasn't hard at all since 80% of the human population had all died, leaving a city full of abandoned vehicles with empty tanks and working keys in their ignition switch. Without much effort, the 3 of them found 2 large freight trucks and a public bus. They got some batteries from an automobile repair shop and changed those in the vehicles, then they filled up a few jerry cans of petrol. They eventually got the vehicles to work. They drove the 3 large vehicles into the small road and parked them in a straight line after much difficulty navigating within the narrow confines. They managed to fill up their vehicles to the brink with food and water. Even after that, there were still a lot of supplies in the warehouse. As the 3 of them were not greedy, after figuring out that the amount in their vehicles should be sufficient, they laid both sides of the walkway with the remaining supplies for any possible lucky survivors. Before they left, Lin Sangio carried with her a few jerry cans of petrol. Luther and Marcy prepared a full carton of wine. "Are you ready?" Lin Sangio, who had grabbed a piece of brick, grinned at her companions. Seeing their nods, she yelled, "Okay. Let's start throwing." With whooping yells from Luther, bricks, rocks, chairs, and all sort of paraphernalia came falling down like meteor rain upon the shopping mall's glass windows enveloped in plants. A series of bright clear sounds could be heard along half the street as glass fragments fell from mid-air like rain. The dark night was suddenly filled with the shimmering reflections from the glass. The tendrils and vines that were leaning against the windows suddenly dangled in mid-air as if they were unable to decide who to attack. But before those vines could trace the human scent back to the culprits, bottles after bottles of strong alcoholic beverages, and cans after cans of petrol flew into from the broken windows. In an instant, the plants were splashed with all that accelerants. The final step of setting the fire required a little more technique. Among the 3 of them, Marcy was the fastest and lightest. She held 4 to 5 lit matches in each hand and raced to the entrance of the shopping mall like a hare. She flung the matches, and they flew and landed into the large patch of greenery. The flames spread out, hissing and crackling. It was not quick but steadfast. In a short time, the first floor was fully lit up by a sea of red burning flames. Before even burning for 5 minutes, they heard a sharp shrill from the center of the large hall in the middle of the shopping mall. It sounded as if something was in pain. All the leaves started flailing around crazily. For whatever reason, Lin Sanjiu suddenly felt a sort of long-awaited ecstasy. She laughed out loud a few times and waved to the 2 people beside her saying, "Let's go." After that, she turned and was the first person to run out of the road. After the few of them had ran out of that street, they heard a large boom. The glass ceiling situated on the top floor of the shopping mall collapsed down to the ground due to fire, following which, half the building was totally buried in flames. They had parked the truck and bus far away from that location earlier. Each of them now drove a vehicle under the remaining starlight just before the sunrise. They hit the road starting on their unknown journey. Shaking her head, Lin Sanjiu banished the memories of the events that happened last night. She looked at her rear mirror once again with a serious look. She then turned on her tail light, slowed down her vehicle and stopped. "What's wrong? Why aren't we continuing?" Luther winded down his window and shouted loudly in Lin Sanjiu's direction. Lin Sanjiu opened the truck door and jumped down. She stood in the middle of the road and held a police baton in her hand. "Someone is following behind us." She frowned as she braced the yellow dust in the air. Chapter 23, Gaining a New Member. The scorching sun overhead roasted everything with its intense heat. Once she stepped out of the vehicle, the torrid heat immediately made her breathing difficult. There was still wind in this hyperthermal hell, but it would be better if there weren't. Every bout of wind was as if a pot of red-hot coal had been thrown at their face. After they had got out of their vehicles, Luther and Marcy's brows furrowed deeply as they covered their noses and mouths. Ever since all the plants and trees have died out, the soil degraded into sand under the high heat due to desertification. The wind stirred up thick clouds of yellow sand wreaking havoc upon the land. Their eyebrows and eyelashes were all covered with sand particles, so it was difficult for them to open their eyes. They could only squint as they looked around. Once Marcy opened her mouth to speak, she started coughing due to the sand before she managed to say a few words. "Are you sure? I was at the back, but I didn't spot any other cars behind us." When Lin Sanjiu got down from her truck, she conveniently grabbed a t-shirt and tied it to her face using it as a mask, so she felt much better compared to the other 2. Tolerating the pain from the scalding yellow sand which lashed continuously at her exposed skin, Lin Sanjiu said quietly, "I am certain. That car had been following us for some time. But the sandstorm is really bad, and it is quite some distance from us, so it was only visible at times. Wait, it's coming." When she finished her sentence, they indeed spotted a car some distance away stirring up a trail of dust. A Citroën so dirty that its color was indistinguishable, drove out of the churning storm of sand. Unexpectedly, when the driver saw that the 3 large vehicles had stopped, and Lin Sanjiu and her gang were in the middle of the road, the person braked sharply and turned his head as if he planned to escape. Unfortunately, the distance between the car and the 3 vehicles was too near, so this wasn't up to the driver. Lin Sanjiu sprinted forward and sped up and, before the Citroën could turn away, she leaped onto the hood of the like leopard. The hood of the car dipped, which shocked the driver of the Citroën. Its wheels made an ear-piercing screech, and the driver inside shouted vaguely. Lin Sanjiu was rocked by the movement of the car, so she quickly laid low on the hood, stabilizing herself before she yelled toward the car interior, "Get out!" Within a blink of an eye, Luther and Marcy also rushed forward and surrounded the Citroën together with Lin Sanjiu. The car stopped, and its engine was cut. Through the dirty windscreen, Lin Sanjiu could see the vague outlines of a person. She could not tell if it was a male or female, young or old. It was incomprehensible how that person could still drive with such visibility. She had waited for a while before she knocked on the windscreen with her police baton impatiently, signaling for the driver to get out of his car. If she was not wrong, the car had been following them since they had left the shopping mall. The car door at the side of the driver's seat opened. A man wearing a crumpled western suit wiped his forehead as he stepped out. The man looked like he was only about 20 plus. He wasn't tall, and his skin was tanned. He had a round fleshy face, and the white shirt that he was wearing was now a dirty, blackish yellow. Lin Sanjiu did not know why, but she felt that if he had some whiskers, he would certainly look like a vole. Even though his suit looked like it was made from a good material, it did not seem to fit him well. His pants, far too long for him, were rolled up, revealing his ash-gray, knee-length socks. "Who are you? Why are you following us?" Marcy questioned with a frown. The vole-like man moved his tar-black little eyes and looked at the three of them panic-strickenly before he stammered, It wasn't on purpose." Luther scoffed at him, "So you accidentally followed us all the way here?" Lin Sanjiu jumped down from the car. She gripped the police baton and stood in front of the car not saying a word. The man appeared to be very afraid of Lin Sanjiu. When she got off his car, he immediately shifted a few steps away from her, putting some distance between himself and her. At the same time, he anxiously explained, No. Listen to my explanation. I've actually seen all of you much earlier. I don't mean any harm. I am a salesman for medical devices. That night, I had just finished entertaining my client. When he was driving me back, there was a sudden power outage, and we were stuck in the jam at the shopping mall. Get to the main point. Marcy shouted in a sterner tone, probably losing her temper as they were tormented by the sand. Yes. Anyway, we were stuck in front of the shopping mall, and we did not dare to get down from the car. We relied only on the carton of drinks in the car for 2 days. I saw the few of you a couple of times, entering and exiting. You seem to have adapted so quickly, it was impressive. When the man explained to this point, he even remembered to flatter them. Noticing that they did not react, he spat out the sand in his mouth, embarrassingly. Then, he continued, after that, on one night, a rather good-looking woman came to us. She said that she had water at home and told my client to get down to accompany her to get some water. I was distracted for a moment, and suddenly, my client disappeared. The women left and continued to the next car. The three of them were stunned for a short moment. Obviously, Kong Yun did not show mercy to the survivors who were on that street outside. When the man saw their expression, he pushed his luck and continued, I did not dare to remain in the car, so I ran to the convenience store that was across the road. I managed to survive till today. This morning, I saw all of you leaving. I was afraid too, so I followed behind. What's your name? Luther was starting to feel a little annoyed as the man was so long-winded. My name is Tian Minbo. Everyone calls me Voli, the man smiled and replied hurriedly. Apparently, she was not the only one that felt that way. Lin Sanjiu chuckled inwardly, but her cold expression remained the same as she asked, What do you want? Voli was startled and quickly replied, I really mean no harm. I have my own supply of food and water. I just want some companions. And, I wanted to give you an advice. An advice? You have been driving your vehicles for some time, right? Voli asked as he eyed the vehicles. I advise all of you to stop driving now. You should wait till night comes. Why? Luther looked around, still frowning. The spot they were at was not very safe. In the past, the area was a famous park. It was originally a vast expanse of greenery and the best part of the city. However, after this 1 month, any remnant of the original park had long disintegrated. All that remained was just sand as far as the eye could see and the black charred remains of countless trees, along with the mixture of this combination stirred by the wind. They could even see the indistinct outlines of a few duoluazhong wandering around. The sky was a hopeless mustard yellow accompanied by a scalding Sunday. This weather is really abnormally hot. If you continue driving, you will burn out the engines. You better believe me. I have already damaged one car, and that was a Mercedes-Benz. Still, it broke down. It nearly burst into flames. Let alone your trucks and bus. Voli wiped the sand off his face, showing a sincere look. It's true. If you don't believe it, you can try to touch your engines. Hearing this, Lin Sangio sighed and stopped Marcy, who was heading back to check. You don't have to go. It's true. Even his Citroën is hot to touch. When Voli heard what Lin Sangio said, he immediately moaned and turned to open his hood. A white smoke accompanied by a burnt scent drifted out. It almost instantaneously dissipated due to the sandstorm. Voli fiddled with the engine nervously. He finally lifted his head with a face still filled with lingering fear. That was close. It nearly broke down. The three of them exchanged looks. They were at a loss. If even that France-manufactured Citroën was going to break down soon, what more could be said of their normal vehicles? They were certainly in a worse state. It seemed like that had no choice but to wait here with Voli for their engines to cool down. The only thing was that Lin Sangio was opposed strongly to staying here due to the surroundings. Their surroundings were too empty. After the park, which covered the area of a few thousand square meters, had become destitute of vegetation, there was an almost boundless, unobstructed view of the area. That is to say, if they met any danger, they wouldn't be able to find a place to hide. Marcy sighed. It looks like we'll have to wait. That's right. Besides, it is too hot outside, so it is not a good place to chat. Why don't all of you come into my car? We can chat in the car. Let's be friends. Seeing that the others were convinced by him, Voli quickly opened his door eagerly, even offering Marcy a bottle of water. I don't have a specific place that I want to go, I just want to find a few companions. Where are you all heading? If you don't mind, let me go along with you. The three of them looked at each other and did not reply for a while. After that whole incident with Kong Yun, they knew that they had to be more cautious. On the other hand, they knew that they could not let the incident affect all their future decisions. No matter what, they would definitely need to interact with other people. When Lin Sangio thought of this, she said, "You can come along with us, but you need to tell us what's your ability." Voli made an O shape with his mouth. Don't tell me that you don't know anything about abilities after this 1 month. Lin Sangio gave a cool expression and purposely used a threatening tone. How are we supposed to trust you and be your companions if we don't even know what you can do? Even though she put it that way, Luther and Marcy looked at each other with some unease. They could not blame him if he did not want to reveal his ability, it wasn't really wrong. But they did not anticipate that Voli would nod his head with little hesitation. So you already knew that? Okay, I will show you. After he had said this, he took out a mobile phone from his pocket. The mobile phone was in a cheapskate plastic casing, making it look very unfashionable. Voli pressed a few buttons on the screen, then showed the screen to the three of them. The screen showed an ongoing call, and the party on the other side was actually 110-1. This mobile phone is my ability. 110 is the only number that I can call right now. If I was under attack, I could dial 110, and in the time frame of 5 to 10 minutes, I will be impervious to all attacks. Of course, it works faster than my demonstration. Voli looked a little timid as he asked, "Is this okay?" While Lin Sangio was still considering, with knitted brows. Marcy had already taken the first step, turned to look at her for confirmation. "I think that is enough, right? Xiaoju." After that, she gave Voli her outstretched hand and smiled, "Let's help each other out in the future." Chapter 24, It's a universal law that the main character must die. 1. Lin Sangio could feel something pressing uncomfortably against the back of her head. Half a day had already passed. She felt exhausted and did not feel like moving, so she just flipped sideways hazily. At that very moment, she suddenly heard a line from a song, "You are my little apple one." It broke the tranquility of the night and sounded rather irritating. Whose ringtone is so loud? That's too disturbing. I can even hear it from the 38th floor. Lin Sanjiu suppressed her sleepiness and opened her eyes. She saw a row of orange round circular grab handles. That's right, I am not in that 38th floor penthouse, this is the new world. She sat upright and saw the rows of seats which were filled with cardboard cartons of supplies. On the side of the wall beside her, there was still a green sign stating, "Priority seat for elderly, disabled, pregnant, and injured." The rare starlight from outside the windows illuminated the rim of the sign dimly. At the top of the exit doors, there was a piece of route map of something similar to that. But the only thing she could discern was the numerical 3. Suddenly, there were a few quick knocks on the door of their public bus. The volume of the Little Apple song grew louder and was followed by Voli's voice, "Hey, it's already 10, you should all wake up. Let's go." Lin Sanjia rubbed her eyes as memories of the current reality flooded her mind. That's right. This afternoon, they had agreed to bring Voli along their journey. They even went into his car, eating, drinking, and chatting for a long time. Even though Voli looked like a timid guy, they only found out that he was quite an attentive person after interacting with him. To conserve their energy for the night, all of them went to rest quickly. Voli, being the only person with a mobile phone, had volunteered to set an alarm so that they could set off at 10 p.m. Lin Sanjio jumped up and walked over the driver's seat. She pressed a button, and the door of the public bus opened, showing Voli, who was still clad in that oversized western suit. Lin Sanjio eyed him a little moodily. "You should switch that alarm off quickly. What will we do if it attracts the Duoluazongs here? And the volume of that thing is way too loud." Voli responded with an "Oh," and quickly switched his phone off. Once that Little Apple song faded, Lin Sanjio felt that the world became much more peaceful. Voli smiled and asked, "Where is Miss Marcy? What about Xiao Lu, are they awake?" "They're at the back," Lin Sanjio replied. Meanwhile, Marcy yawned and walked over. She rinsed her mouth with mineral water and sat down in the driver's seat sleepily. Luther nodded his head at Voli, acknowledging his presence, and rubbed his eyes as he headed back to the truck. From the back, he also looked listless. Everyone looks so tired. Lin Sanjio thought as she could not help yawning again. On the contrary, Voli seemed to be in high spirits. He went back and forth checking all the engines. Once he saw that there were no problems, he waved his arms enthusiastically. "That's great. We set off now." After she washed up and sat in the truck for a while, her drowsiness slowly abated. She was finally fully awake. She looked at the map in her hands, searching for the road towards the industrial park in Zijiao, and was the first one to start up her vehicle. Zijiao was one of the famous industrial parks in the city. There were all sorts of factories and processing plants there. The factories there usually had their own dormitories and canteens. Basically, they were pretty much small self-contained ecospheres. Once they reached there, finding backup electrical generators, supplies, and shelter shouldn't be a problem. The other vehicles followed her lead and slowly started their engines. She had to admit that allowing Voli to join them was right. He not only knew how to maintain cars, but the most surprising thing was that he had a few sets of walkie-talkies in his car. Even though the walkie-talkies could only work within a short distance, but at least they could communicate with each other while driving their own respective vehicles now. Luther's jovial voice came through the walkie-talkie on the seat beside her. "Xiaoju, how far are we from the industrial park?" "It depends. If we don't meet any traffic obstructions, this shortest route should only take an hour. After we go over this hill, we will be able to see a traffic sign soon." Just as she said this, her stomach suddenly made a weird grumble. "That's bad," she silently thought to herself. Sure enough, Luther heard that sound. "Haha. What's that sound? Do we have to stop for a while so that you can relieve yourself?" There was a sound of a laughter escaping from someone, obviously Marcy. "I am just a little hungry," Lin Sanjio scolded jokingly. I'm sure a brat like you doesn't have a girlfriend." While she said this, she searched for a packet of cookies irritably, opened up the packaging and ate a piece, as the others laughed over the walkie-talkies. They were actually quite lucky since most of the cars, on the road they were on, parked lawfully at the side of the road. Even when they occasionally met some abandoned cars blocking the road, they managed to squeeze through due to the serious desertification. The boundaries between the road and the sidewalk was no longer so clearly defined. As a result, even after they had been driving for over 10 minutes, the group of vehicles was still heading toward the industrial park via the shortcut. "I heard a pop sound just now, did any of you heard that?" Marcy suddenly asked while driving. Voley immediately responded worriedly, "Miss Marcy, let's hope that it is not a problem with your engines." "Where did that sound come from?" "It is too muffled, so I am not sure. But there is no sound now. If you hear it again, I will help you check the engines again." After hearing that, Lin Sanjiu could not help looking at her rear mirror. Behind the second truck, she could see the public bus. It was moving normally, and she could even see Marcy's vague outline sitting in the driver's seat. Nothing looked out of place. Not thinking anything more about that, she casually winded down her window. A gust of hot night wind rushed in, and her hair instantly flowed behind her. The subsequent turn of events played out like a movie. It happened so clearly yet so unrealistically. Almost suddenly, she heard a loud cry over the walkie-talkie. That was Luther's voice, but she could not make out what he was saying. Lin Sanjiu's heart trembled, and just as she was about to ask, "How are you?" she heard a sharp screeching break. Thereafter, a loud boom of collision rang out in the air. Lin Sanjiu's heart skipped a beat. She stuck her head out of the window, braving the strong winds, and turned to look behind. Her heart almost stopped. In the scene she saw through her flowing black hair, the front portion of Luther's truck was now sideways, and the truck was stopped horizontally across the middle of the road. As there was no time to react, the bus that was behind it collided with it violently. Plumes of thick smoke rose immediately. Luther's body flew out of the driver's seat, as countless broken glass sprayed outwards. His body was stuck in mid-air as if time froze. A long mouthpart was protruding out from his stomach, and the thing behind the mouthpart was hiding within the truck. All these happened so quickly that she didn't even have the time to blink. Lin Sanjiu's eyes turned red. She yelled and stopped her truck. Once she got out of her truck, she raced toward Luther. But before she could reach him, the bus suddenly exploded with a boom. Along with the smoke and flames from the accident, glass flew out everywhere. The glass rain instantaneously scratched Lin Sanjiu's exposed skin, covering her with bleeding cuts all over. She was pushed to the ground by the shock wave of the explosion, and her whole body was covered with wounds. However, Lin Sanjiu sat in a daze on the ground, as if she did not felt a thing. This was because she could see very clearly. As the glass fragments fell, she also saw pieces of blood-covered flesh falling and that familiar red hair. "You've got to be kidding, right?" The Citroën that was at the back of the line nearly hit the bus. Voley was so shocked that his face was a ghastly white when he opened his car doors. He shouted, How did this happen?" After she sat startled for a long time, she finally stood up. Without a word, she ran toward the truck with her red rage-filled eyes. Voley, who was panting heavily, quickly pulled her aside and yelled, "You have to calm down." Before he finished his sentence, a dark shadow loomed over him. He lifted his head and was shocked. Probably because Lin Sanjiu did not secure the brakes on the truck when she stopped her vehicle so suddenly, it had rolled backward toward them. Voley wanted to let go of Lin Sanjiu and escape, but the truck was too close. He had only lifted his feet when the large steel body of the truck swallowed the both of them. First round, it was a complete wipeout. Chapter 25, It's a universal law that the main character must die. 2. In the dark, Lin Sanjiu could feel something pressing uncomfortably against the back of her head. Half a day had already passed. She felt exhausted and did not feel like moving, so she just flipped sideways hazily. The next second, she woke up abruptly from her dream, panting heavily. Lin Sanjia lowered her head and saw her trembling hands. Dead? Am I dead? Is everyone dead? She turned her head looking vacantly. She found Marcy and Luther sleeping alongside each other quite close to her. Both of them were frowning as if they were in a sort of nightmare. Even though they were still asleep, she could see the movement of their chests. That was enough proof that they were still alive and well. So, was that just a dream? Lin Sanjio stood up from the floor. Her hands and feet still felt cold, and her whole body was weak. The moment that she died, the moment all the bones and organs in her body were crushed, the moment when she slipped into a boundless darkness, that almost unbelievable pain, was that all a dream? She shivered. She opened the door and stepped out of the bus. She desperately needed some fresh air so that she could clear her mind. Just as she stepped outside, a deafening "You are my little apple" rang out loudly, tearing the tranquility of the night. Lin Sanjio paused for a moment. She heard it again, just like the previous time, or more rightly, in her dream. The noisy ringtone did not last as long as in her dream. Instead, someone stopped it quickly before even 2 lines of the song. The darkness returned to a dead silence. Lin Sanjia gazed quietly at the direction of the citron, motionlessly. Even after a while, Voli did not come out to wake them. She felt a little impatient and decided to take a look, but suddenly she heard a soft cry of shock from the bus, following which, Marcy called out, "Luther! Xiaoju!" Lin Sanjio immediately rushed into the bus. At the same time, Luther woke up gasping and sitting upright. The 3 of them exchanged glances, finding that each of their faces was pale. "I dreamed that I died," the 3 of them suddenly said together when they matched glances. How could that be?" Luther was the first to react. "Both of you also dreamed of your own death?" "Not only me." Lin Sanjio's face darkened. "I dreamed that the 4 of us all died." "Why don't you tell me about your dream first?" Following the order of their deaths, Luther was the first one to speak. "My dream just now was simply too realistic. I dreamed that we were on the way to an industrial park. Suddenly, a duoluazhong jumped onto the top of my vehicle. It smashed the windows on the other side, and all of a sudden my stomach," his face turned pale, and he looked like he could not continue. "Huh? How can that be? In my dream, you were attacked by a duoluazhong, so you turned your truck, and I collided with you." Marcy was shocked as her light brown eyes widened, staring at Luther. "I was badly injured and was trying to climb out of the driver's seat when there was a sudden explosion, and you died as well," Lin Sanjio interjected with cold sweat all over her body. "How did you know?" "That's because I was around when it happened." Lin Sanjio shut her eyes, returning to that scene. "When both of you died, my truck rolled backward and crushed Voli and myself. It was as if heaven played a prank on us. We were all killed just like that. How is this possible? Our dreams were all connected." Luther mumbled to himself. Marcy and Lin Sanjio furrowed their brows. They were momentarily speechless. While the atmosphere between them froze over, they heard Voli's voice outside the bus. "Is everyone awake?" She was not sure if she heard wrongly, but his voice seemed to tremble a little. Did he have the same dream? Almost as if to verify their thoughts, Voli poked his head in and said, "I want to tell you something, but don't scold me. I just had a dream where every one of us died. I am not trying to jinx us, but we have to be careful today. That dream was just too realistic." "Hey, what's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that?" Lin Sanjio could feel a head-splitting headache. She beckoned for Voli. "We had the same dream. Come in, let's make sense of the matter." Voli agreed and quickly climbed up the bus. The 4 of them sat in a circle. Everything was pretty straightforward. For some unknown reason, the 4 of them shared the same dream. The surprising thing was, despite them dying in their dreams at different times, Each of the details in their dreams matched up perfectly. The pop sound that Marcy heard was probably the sound that the Duoluazhong which killed Luther made. The Duoluazhong must have had run across the bus and landed on the top of the truck. Then, it attacked Luther. Even the event where Lin Sanjiu was hungry midway and ate a cookie, or the jokes that Voli told Luther. Their recollections corroborated with each other's. Hearing the other three of them discussing intensely, Lin Sanjiu raised her head frustratingly, feeling perplexed. She took a deep breath and paused for a moment. Wait. What's the matter? The three of them looked at her in confusion. Did you get a sudden insight? Unexpectedly, Lin Sanjiu asked a totally random question. Marcy, what is the bus route that public bus takes? Marcy thought for a while. If it isn't 89, it's 90. I can't really remember, but it is those two numbers. Look. Lin Sanjiu pointed at the route map which was above the exit doors. The various stops on the route could not be seen, but there was only a bright red 2. Was I wrong? Is this bus number 2? Marcy looked at Lin Sanjiu, puzzled. But Xiaoju, is this very important? Lin Sanjiu stared at the numerical 2 for a very long time. Suddenly, she jumped up and swore. What the F *CK? What's the matter? The rest of them asked in succession. I was thinking that this looked really familiar. I remembered. Lin Sanjiu could feel the hair on her neck stand as she continued, in my dream, I saw this. The only difference was that in my dream, that was a 3 and not a 2. She glanced at the three of them, and her tone turned even more serious. I have lived in this city for many years, and I've never seen this sort of thing. All the public bus should just have a bus route. That is to say, this number only appeared afterward. Almost as if she remembered something, Marcy exclaimed, ah, and covered her mouth. Lin Sanjiu's tone was heavy as if it weighed a ton. You still don't understand? This means that we are either dreaming right now or the fact that we died was not a dream. Luther unconsciously pinched his own arm and responded, I am a 100% sure that I am not dreaming. That's weird. If we really did die for one round, why are we still all right now? Lin Sanjiu wanted to speak, but her attention was drawn to Voli's quiet voice. Those numbers the previous time was a 3, now it is a 2. Is that a countdown? Does that mean that we have 2 more chances? From when the time the 4 of them had decided to form a group, this was the first time that Lin Sanjiu saw this side of Voli. His head was lowered so she could not see his expression clearly. But somehow, there was a weird indescribable aura about him. She took a deep breath and said, I have the same sentiments. The atmosphere became tense again as everyone fell silent. Is there a time limit to this thing? Luther held his arm, being the first to break the silence. If there is one, we can just wait here safely until it is over before we continue our journey. Marcy sighed, I'm afraid it isn't that simple. Sticking to the main topic, what exactly is this? Why is such a thing happening? Before Marcy finished lamenting, Voli suddenly interrupted her and spoke in an exceptionally resolute tone, I feel that we definitely can't just sit here. How would we know if there is really a time limit to this? If we continue waiting, will something else happen? These are all unknown variables. But if we follow our previous path, we already know what the dangers are, so from my perspective, we should set off as before but just be more careful. Lin Sanjiu couldn't help looking at Voli again. No matter how many Duoluazongs they would kill, or how many times they escaped death during a dangerous situation. One thing was certainly clear, everyone that is alive is not dead. Yet, Lin Sanjiu did experience death once, just now. It was true as can be. It was a death where she lost both her body and consciousness. The shock of death could not be compared to anything she had experienced. Death was a grey cloud which loomed over every human ever since their birth. It was the unavoidable ultimate fear of the end that no sage could escape. Lin Sanjiu still shivered when she recalled the moment of her death. On the other hand, Voli could still calmly analyze the situation. She couldn't help praising him. Voli, I really couldn't tell that you were a person that could still remain so collected after what we've been through. After he heard her praise, he instantly regained his usual demeanor and gave an unctuous smile. Hey, I am just an unimportant person, I just have this life. I am happy just to survive, why would I even dare to be weak? Lin Sanjiu did not say a word and withdrew her admiration. Voli's words had convinced all of them. They discussed a while more and quickly came to a conclusion. This time, they would follow what Voli said and be more alert. Since they were prepared this time, all of them should come out of this unharmed, right? Chapter 26, It's a universal law that the main character must die. 3. Firstly, we must have a grasp on that Duoluazhong's movement, Lin Sanjiu said with a serious face as she looked at her companions. It all started out when Marcy heard a pop sound, right? Where did it come from? At this point, their group of 4 vehicles was parked at the side of the road, in the same succession as before. The 4 of them stood atop the bus, frowning intensely. Marcy closed her eyes to recall the details. I was driving and I heard a sound, but I couldn't tell where it was from. I only knew that it sounded muffled. I think the source was some distance away from my driver's seat. That would mean that it was from the mid-back segment of the bus. Lin Sanjiu strolled over to the mid-back of the bus and suddenly exerted her strength and leaped upward from that spot. With her enhanced body, her ability to jump had reached a level that shouldn't be underestimated. She managed to jump to the height of an adult human. Thereafter, she landed heavily on the metal roof of the bus, but it only made a dull thump. It is not possible to hear a sound at this volume if you were driving. Lin Sanjiu concluded, a Duoluazhong is at least half my weight, right? With this line of reasoning, the fellow must have jumped down from a very high location. From a very high location, the few of them frowned as they recalled their previous journey, trying to remember if they had seen any tall buildings. Suddenly, Marcy asked, since the Duoluazhong had already landed on my vehicle, why didn't it kill me? Instead, it abandoned the nearest target and decided to kill Luther. I mean, the bus has a large windshield, it would be easy for me to spot it. It probably planned to create a pileup. Voli looked to his left and right. If the second vehicle meets with a mishap, the subsequent 2 vehicles would be in trouble. My car collided with the back of your vehicle, but I was all right. If it wanted to create a pileup, wouldn't it be faster if he targeted Xiaoju? Luther retorted with a question. Voli took a deep breath. He thought about it a while longer before giving up. Who knows? Maybe that Duoluazhong is crazy, so it just randomly chose you. Will it choose me again this time round? Or will it choose someone else randomly? Luther felt more and more frustrated as they discussed about it. D***MN. This countdown provides too little information. There is no way we can infer about anything. Don't overthink matters. Lin Sanjiu walked over and patted his shoulder in a consoling manner. I think it shouldn't be too hard to avoid this accident. At least we are certain about the location where it happened. We can stop before we reach the slope. We can survey the area, patrol it. Any Duoluazhong we spot, we'll kill. I don't believe we can't overcome this. Her resolute and decisive tone immediately raised the confidence of the people in her party. After all, it was just a single Duoluazhong. That's right. This time round, we will make a preemptive strike. Voli agreed with a smile. After they had made their preliminary plans, they continued with the journey as the scorching night continued. To avoid any other complications, their vehicles were in the same formation. The only difference now is that they had learned a lesson from their previous experience. The windows in their vehicles have been winded down, and each of them now had a weapon beside them which they could readily grab. They drove slowly throughout their journey, and no one spoke a word. Everyone was fully alert and listened carefully to their surroundings. They did not want to miss even a small hint of unusual activity. Feeling her parched throat, Lin Sanjiu swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Just then, Marcy whispered over the walkie-talkie, "It's here. Stop your vehicles." Lin Sangio shouted into her walkie-talkie. She pressed down on her brake, switched off the ignition, and jumped out of her truck holding her police baton. The slope where the four of them met that untimely end was just in front of them. The four vehicles were now parked at the bottom of the slope. At the same time, Luther, Marcy, and Voley rushed out of their vehicles. They surrounded the bus with weapons in their hands, and all of them looked up at the roof of the bus at the same time. There were no street lights in that night deprived of human civilization. However, with the headlights from the Citroën and their evolved night vision, the few of them could see clearly. On the top of the bus, there was a crouching figure of a dark shadow. Seeing that long, constantly moving mouthpart, what else could it be other than a duoluashong? Discovering that it was surrounded, the duoluashong immediately stood up. It turned and ran toward the back of the bus. Lin Sangio widened her eyes and inhaled. The duoluashong did not show any sign of shrinkage, its body was no different from a normal human. For it to reach such a state, how many victims did it have to fully drain? Even its speed was the same as a normal person. If it wasn't for the long mouth part, Lin Sangio would have thought that it was a normal person. Trying to escape after you've killed me? Dream on. Luther was the first person to react. He gritted his teeth, and once his feet pushed away from the ground, he lunged forward like an arrow. In a blink of an eye, he was already some distance away. Lin Sangio and Marcy followed suit quickly. The only person without much fighting capabilities, Voley, ran a few steps after them before stopping to pant. He yelled out toward their back, "I will just keep a lookout here. All of you. You can do it." The duoluashong's speed was almost on par with a normal person, but were the people chasing it even considered normal? Within half a minute, the three of them had already blocked its path and surrounding it. The duoluashong stared at the three of them without moving. The three of them stood on guard. For a moment, nobody initiated any attacks. Facing their enemy in close proximity, the three of them immediately felt a wave of nausea. The duoluashong was apparently male, and its body was well hydrated. Just looking at its body, it was entirely like a normal human being. Not only his body, but it still retained its eyelids over its long slit eyes, its high forehead was also flat and smooth. It looked really normal without a single disgusting feature. However, the undeniable fact was that it had a mouthpart attached to its normal clean male face. There was a black hole where his nose and mouth should have been, and a large mosquito-like mouthpart extended from the deep hole. It looked as if it was exactly designed to display such a strange contrast, so much so that Lin Sangio would rather look at Wang Sisi. "Why do all of you seem prepared?" A human voice came from the male duoluashong's mouthpart. There was even a revolting hint of a smile in its eyes. "I just arrived, and all of you stopped your vehicles at once. Who sent you a message? Why does it seem like it was implying that there were other duoluashong? I don't like to have a rubbish conversation with non-human creatures." This thought flashed through Lin Sangio's head. Without much planning, Lin Sangio smiled, and a white light flashed in her palm a couple of times. There was suddenly a few cards in her left hand. This was a new technique she had developed after testing her ability multiple times. As she waved her left hand, she threw out 5 thin cards which immediately flew straight ahead following her intentions. They rapidly close in on the duoluashong. Next, the 5 cards dispersed in mid-air, arranging themselves to target the duoluashong's anterior. That's right. Lin Sangio could control the speed and trajectory of the cards in mid-air. This was a formidable technique. Unfortunately, there was a great limitation. At her current state, she could only control the cards for 5 seconds. Quicker than words could describe, and before the duoluashong realized the situation it was facing, the 5 cards accelerated and directly headed toward the duoluashong's vital points. Just when they were about to touch its skin, the 5 cards turned in sharp razor blades at the same time. As it dodged and countered, Not all 5 blades struck their target, but one of the razor blades pierced deeply into the Duoluazhong's left eyes. A sharp shriek rang out in the night sky, and the Duoluazhong's mouthpart trembled uncontrollably in mid-air. Quick! This is our chance! Luther rushed forward brandishing a police baton. He landed a heavy strike. With a dreadful sound, the Duoluazhong's chin was shattered. It was practically clear that the Duoluazhong had to die here today. As that thought rose in his mind, Luther suddenly saw a reflective shine from the corner of his eyes. It was immediately followed by an explosive bang, which sounded like a gunshot. The reflective shine extended into a straight line and shot towards Voli's chest like a meteorite. The color drained from his face, and he desperately reached for his mobile phone. But just as he summoned it out, a mist of blood burst forth from his chest cavity, and his body and phone fell heavily to the ground at the same time. Subsequently, Voli snatched his last breath with widened eyes as his mobile phone disappeared with a white light on the spot. Everything happened too quickly. The 3 of them who were engaged in combat with the Duoluazhong could not react fast enough. They stared at Voli's body, stunned. Using that opportunity, the Duoluazhong dared not continue the fight. Instead, he did a flip, escaped their encirclement and turned to run. Lin Sanjia was about to poise herself to chase after it. Suddenly, an alarm exploded in her mind. Before she could even respond, she dropped to the ground and rolled to a side. Another gunshot rang out. There was now a hole in the ground where she was previously standing, and white smoke rose from it. This time, she fully understood the situation. We are being sniped at? All of you, look for a place to hide. Quick! Marcy and Luther flung themselves toward the bus and hid behind it while Lin Sanjia crouched behind the Citroën. They were all panting. After the other party had lost sight of their target, the sound of gunshots stopped. The night fell back to a still silence. Mr. Viovoli is dead, Marcy whispered, sounding like it was something that was somewhat difficult to accept. It must be done by that Duoluazhong's accomplices, right? Lin Sanjia could feel her heart palpitating as if it was about to burst out from her chest. We are really unlucky. We actually met a Duoluazhong that knows how to snipe. Luther gave her a complicated look and shook his head. It is not done by that Duoluazhong, I saw it just now. In the building on the left, I saw spots of metallic light. The bullet that hit Voli was one of the spots of the lights. Hearing what he described, the 2 others looked at him with widened eyes. Isn't that an evolved ability? Unquestionably, evolved abilities can only be used by humans. Luther replied bitterly, that's right, it must be an evolved scum who partnered with that Duoluazhong. Momentarily, Lin Sanjia was unable to digest that information. Partnered? Partnering with a Duoluazhong? What did he stand to gain? Just as she said this, she heard a thump above her head. She instinctively looked upward only to see that Duoluazhong which had fled just moments before. It was standing on the roof of the Citroën, its long mouthpart was dangling beside Lin Sanjia's shoulder. Chapter 27, It was simply a death full of grievances. Looky here. Isn't this the missus who stabbed one of my eyes? Aren't you going to run? My attack range is really wide. I think you will have to run over there if you want to avoid getting stabbed by me. Under Lin Sanjia's horror-filled gaze, the Duoluazhong did not attack. Instead, it pointed to an empty patch not far from her. His words were interjected with frivolous laughter, and he narrowed his long slit-like eyes in an exceedingly unpleasant manner. When it was human, it should have been a repulsive man somehow, this thought flashed through Lin Sanjia's mind. She stared unwaveringly in the direction of the Duoluazhong, her palm flashed with a white light, and she held another handful of cards. Despite the fact that her body was slightly trembling from her intense nervousness, she forced herself to stay in the same spot. It was a joke if it thought that she would run out to the open space, allowing herself to get sniped. She was not stupid. With such proximity, she could only strike first. Once again, Lin Sanjiu threw the cards in her hand toward the duoluazhong. However, the duoluazhong was prepared this round. It took a step back and swiftly deflected most of the cards with its mouth part. The single card that it dodged was summoned back to Lin Sanjiu's hand. But when she took a glance, she could not help silently swearing. Of all cards, that remaining card was a support card which was used in tandem with the razor blades. It was a black cloth used for obstructing the enemy's line of view. She had finished all the razor blades in her arsenal this round. The razor blades that she used were now on the ground. If she wanted to use them again, she had to touch them. Otherwise, she had no other method of retrieving them back. In that 1 month, she consciously kept many items as cards. However, with this incident, she was only left with various items that were useless in this situation. Looking at the card in Lin Sanjiu's hand, the duoluazhong merely squinched its remaining eye. It walked to the edge of the car roof and started chuckling menacingly. Lin Sanjiu expected it to say something, but suddenly it swung its mouth part and thrust it toward her. In that instant, she realized that she was too close to the mouth part. She simply could not evade it if she did not run outward. Marcy gave a shout of dismay as Lin Sanjiu rolled outward in desperation. She felt a burning sensation on her shoulder. In the end, she was still scratched by the mouth part, and a bloody wound appeared on her shoulder. Pressing down on her wounded shoulder, her eyes swept involuntarily to the building opposite them. She only realized then that she had already rolled away from her cover and was now exposed. No, it is too dangerous. With a single thought, the black cloth flew up in the air and opened up with a quick whoosh. At almost the same time, sounds of gunshots rang in the air after that brief silence. 2 consecutive shots were fired. Thanks to the distraction brought about by the movement of the black cloth, the sniper lost focus. One of the rays of light created a hole in the ground beside her. Unfortunately, the second shot pierced through Lin Sanjiu's knee in an instant. It hurt so much that she let out a cry of pain. It was impossible for her to stand, so she just laid on the same spot gasping for air. You mother of asterisker! Witnessing that scene, Luther could not control himself. He leaped out, holding the police baton in his hand, and yelled out as he swung a violent blow toward the duoluazhong. At the same time, Marcy lunged herself toward where Lin Sanjiu was lying. She planned to pull Lin Sanjiu to safety. The latter was just lying defenselessly on the ground. With another ray of light, that will certainly be the end for Lin Sanjiu. However, just when Marcy grabbed her hand, preparing to drag her behind the car, the sniper rifle rang out again. Lin Sanjiu watched helplessly as a mist of blood erupted from Marcy's chest, and tiny red droplets sprayed across her face. Marcy, she called out in a daze. Through Marcy's lifeless light brown eyes, Lin Sanjiu could see the reflection of her own pale distraught face. In the next instant, Marcy's dead body, stripped of all support, fell heavily onto Lin Sanjiu. Her tears gushed out as the dead body landed on her. Even though she had already experienced it once, the death of a companion still brought her unbearable grief. Marcy! Luther, who was not far from them, yelled out furiously like an injured creature. Lin Sanjiu's heart dropped for a second. She mustered all her strength and shouted loudly, "Don't come here, hide." But Luther turned a deaf ear to her advice. He waved his police baton pushing back the duoluazhong, then turned and rushed over. Within a second, he plopped down kneeling beside the two of them. Luther looked at the dead body, unable to speak for quite a while. He was already exposed, but there was no sound of gunshot unlike what Lin Sanjiu expected. Besides, Luther seemed to have forgotten that he reached them and touched Marcy's hair with his trembling hands. He let out a sob and looked at Lin Sanjiu with reddened pleading eyes. "Let's restart this. We still have one more chance. Marcy is my family." The fresh red numeral flashed in front of her eyes. Suddenly, she felt a chill in her heart. Do they really have one more chance? So far, everything was just a conjecture. What if it wasn't a countdown and everyone just had a precognitive dream? Luther's eyes glistened with tears. Under the night sky, they shimmered with a pleading hope. Looking at his eyes, Lin Sanjia practically could not bring herself to express her doubts. Okay, she averted her gaze, forcing the word out of her mouth, but did not receive any response. She lifted her eyes only to see that Luther's face was now rigid and had turned an unprecedented ashen white. Lin Sanjia felt instantly crushed, like a crumbling ice tower. She stared fixedly at Luther's face, calling his name urgently, "Luther, Luther. Say something. Talk to me." Emptiness shrouded Luther's eyes as blood seeped out of his mouth. His limp body flopped over Marcy, revealing a blood-covered mouthpart piecing his fair white neck. Wow. Even when they die, they have to die together. I am so moved by such friendship. But are you all scared out of your wits? Restart this? Don't tell me you believe that you can resurrect the dead. The Duoluazhong's long, sinister eye gleamed with satisfaction. Mrs., don't cry. Every bit of moisture from your body is extremely precious to me. Only then did Lin Sanjia realize that she was crying wordlessly. Comparing the gravity of having witnessed her friends die one by one in front of her, that so-called chance was ever so elusive. She could no longer feel the pain from her wound. The Duoluazhong took its own sweet time pulling out its mouthpart and approaching her. Lin Sanjia strained her eyes, staring at the building across the road. There were 4 or 5 metallic spots of light behind the window of an unknown level. The view behind the window was largely covered by a curtain, so she could only make out a vague figure of a person whom gender she could not tell. Before I die, I must find out at least which story the gunshots were fired from. Lin Sanjia thought to herself. 1, 2, 3, 7, 8. I bet you didn't expect that there was another person there, right? How is it? My woman's ability is not bad, huh? Following her gaze, the Duoluazhong turned back to Lin Sanjia and said almost boastfully. His tone dripped with conceit. Lin Sanjia could not hear anything else clearly. Her mind was only occupied with the counting in her head. When she counted to 12, through her eyes clouded by her unstoppable tears, she saw the mouthpart covered in Luther's fresh blood. It rose in front of her. Her world suddenly became dark and blurry. Her consciousness dissipated into nothingness just like mere vapors. As he left, an unfamiliar male voice suddenly came from somewhere. Yeah. In the end, I could not resist using that thing, another man replied. This turned out as expected. From what I see, these people have quite the potential. Who would have known that they would meet opponents much stronger than them at the get-go? They're unlucky. If I don't use it now, I might not be able to use it the next time. **T, that's mine. We have to catch him. The man gritted his teeth and said. Hey, look. This is a rare growth type. Tut, tut. That's true. So, do you want to help them? The indistinct voices of the 2 strangers drifted away. Lin Sanjia had totally slipped into an unconscious darkness. It was the death that she had already experienced once. Second round, another complete wipeout. Chapter 28, The names of these worlds are too weird. What the hell happened? As the female voice cursed angrily, she gave a violent kick to the door of the bus with her boots on. The exit door of the bus immediately rattled in its frame. The bright red numerical 1 above it still hung steadily above it. Behind Lin Sanjia was Marcy, who sighed with a lowered head, and Luther, who had just calmed down from his fury. Does this mean that we only have one chance left? Lin Sanjia took a deep breath. Her bloodshot eyes glowered, and her unfathomable fury grew. Who are the people responsible for all that f***ry behind our backs? Xiaoju, don't be so mad. If we looked at it from another perspective, perhaps we were saved by that countdown. Otherwise, we would have all been dead, Marcy consoled her softly but was still at a loss as to what they would do next. Even though it might be true, momentarily, Lin Sanjiu found it difficult to accept. She could not help feeling that someone was toying with them. She tried her best to curb her anger as both her hands clenched the sides of her pants tightly. After some time, she suddenly stood up. "I am going out for a walk." Luther massaged his temples as if he had a headache. His expression was not any better. She walked a few steps away from the bus while the night wind spat waves of sand at her. The slight pain made Lin Sanjiu deeply aware that she was still alive. Silence surrounded her, without a single hint of noise. It was so quiet that she could even hear the blood flowing through the vessels in her ears. This was perhaps the reason why her intense emotions gradually waned. "It's so quiet. But, isn't it a little too quiet?" She kept feeling like something was amiss. Lin Sanjiu knitted her brows as her gaze drifted to the dirty citron a short distance away from her. "That's right, during the previous 2 times, Voli would have already gone over to wake us up by this time. But why didn't we hear his mobile phone alarm? Could it be that he hasn't woken up?" Just as that thought occurred to her, Lin Sanjiu strode quickly to the citron and began calling out a little worriedly, "Voli, are you awake?" After she waited for a while, she still heard no activity from the car. She could not wait any longer. She wiped the car's dirt-covered windshield with her sleeve, then bent over and peeked inside. The front passenger seat was reclined backward and used as a bed. There were packets of half-eaten food, empty water bottles, and some dirty clothes. The only thing missing was Voli himself. Lin Sanjiu felt herself getting anxious. She surveyed the area as she circled the group of parked vehicles. There was only a vast emptiness around them. The trees had long turned to ashes, so she had an unobstructed view which stretched as far as she could see. Unfortunately, even after she had walked 2 rounds around the area, she could not even spot a single footprint of Voli. Coincidentally, Luther and Marcy were getting off the bus while chatting. When Lin Sanjiu heard them, she quickly ran over to them yelling, "Voli is not in his car, he's missing. Should we go look for him?" They were stunned. They never expected that Voli would go missing. Marcy opened her mouth and was just about to speak when they heard a lethargic voice coming from the roof of the bus. "I'd say, you shouldn't look for him. You probably won't find him anyway." The 3 of them were shocked by the voice as they instinctively took a couple of steps back and looked up at the roof. Against the large silver-white moon that hung in the night sky, they could see 2 dark figures. One of them was standing, and the other was sitting down. They did not even realize when these men arrived. The torrid night wind swept past the 2 figures. It was difficult to make out their faces as their shadows melted into the moonlight. From what it seemed, the person who spoke previously was the one sitting down. He appeared to be rather relaxed as one of his legs dangled from the roof. "Why are all of you looking at me like that? So you also think that I'm good looking," he quipped. The 3 of them were dumbfounded for a moment. Lin Sanjiu opened her mouth and asked, "What did you do to Vio?" Just then, the man who was standing made a quiet scoffing sound interrupting her. Suddenly he stepped forward into the moonlight and leaped upward. The dark figure landed impactfully on the ground, stirring up a cloud of dust. The man had a tall and sturdy stature. His muscular body was like that of a wild beast, exuding a dangerous aura of pent-up energy. He carried a long, slightly curved sword on his back, which appeared to resemble a katana. But he lacked a scabbard, which made it a mystery how he actually attached the sword to his back. The metal-forged blade of his sword glimmered faintly in the dark. For post-humans, jumping down from the roof of a bus wasn't something complicated, but somehow, something about that man raised Lin Sanjiu and the others' alarm, and they slipped into defensive postures. The man lifted his head, and he lifted a corner of his mouth slowly, revealing to the 3 of them a smile which one would call malicious. In an instant, an imposing pressure like they had never experienced before swept toward them like a wave of a tsunami. As if the person had drawn out all the air from the atmosphere, the three of them even stopped breathing for a second. It became difficult for them to even stand as they were assaulted by that pressure. Marcy tried to hold her position, but she was the first one to be unable to withstand it and fell on the ground with a plop as her face turned white. With a face brimming with defiance, his forehead was covered in cold sweat as he was forced into a half-kneel position. Lin Sanjia felt as though the man in front of her was squeezing her heart in his hand. Every strained muscle in her body throbbed to keep her propped up. She trembled as she tried her best to resist the urge to turn and run away. She felt practically like a hare that had encountered a cougar in the prairies. It was a sort of despair that arose from her powerlessness. They were definitely on different levels on the food chain. By this point, Lin Sanjia's keen senses was fully triggered, and all the cells in her body were screaming to her, "Run! Run! Run!" Just when she was about to give in to her impulse to turn and run away, the man, who was still sitting while he spoke, leaped off the roof, landing lightly. A breeze, like a wind in spring which appears from nowhere, sending away the frost of winter and bringing to bloom a million pear blossoms, lightly washed over Lin Sanjia's face. The seemingly murderous intent which hung heavily in the air immediately abated. Once he landed, he chided, "Why did you scare them?" Thereafter, he turned to look at the three of them, consoling, "Everything's fine. It is just a bad habit of his. You don't have to be afraid." The man with the katana on his back harumphed. He countered coldly, "That's 'cause they're weak as sh*t. Who are you guys?" Lin Sanjio asked as her heartbeat gradually stabilized. The more she heard their voice, the more familiar they sounded. "Why did you look for us?" Luther went over to help Marcy back up on her feet. Hearing Lin Sanjia question, he quickly added, "And what did you mean when you say that we shouldn't look for Voli?" Even though he was young, he was very insightful. Once that man with a gentle voice jumped down, he immediately noticed that the two men had no intention of harming them. Judging from the situation, if that man with the fierce gaze wanted to kill them, he might only need less than 30 seconds. The man who was sitting down moments before was actually as good looking as he claimed. He had white dazzling teeth, and his smile reminded them of a peach blossom petal. Seeing the slightly pitiable state that the three of them were in, he suddenly exclaimed, smiling, "I guess you have no idea what situation you are in." The three to them did not reply. The man with the katana suddenly chipped, "Not only weak but stupid." Lin Sanjia reacted with a frown, but with the shreds of fear that still persisted, she finally bit her lips and kept quiet. "They are new to this after all," Mr. Peach Blossom mediated. Facing the few of them, he said, all right. I will tell you everything from the start. From the looks of it, all of you haven't really experienced much of the new worlds." Luther looked at Marcy, then he replied hesitantly, "We have gone through 2 new worlds, and this is the first time for Xiaoju." When he heard this, Mr. Peach Blossom was taken aback. He gazed at them with widened eyes. "2. You experienced 2 E-level worlds consecutively. What's an E-level world?" Luther asked, perplexed. "Huh." A troubled expression appeared on Mr. Peach Blossom's face. "Really? I didn't expect that. We will meet total newbies. Listen. All the parallel universes inflicted with the New World phenomenon are classified into 5 levels, from E to A, based on survival difficulty. I think you all must have played video games before? Right, it's like a game. If you ask me how they are classified, I can only say that people from somewhere do that. You wouldn't know even if I told you. Anyway, for everyone to better adapt to the new worlds, they are segregated into 5 levels, and E-level is the most leisurely." When she heard the word leisurely, Marcy's expression instantly changed, but eventually, she still remained silent. On the other hand, Luther was quick to retort. His fair face was flushed, but he suppressed his anger, saying, "Most leisurely? Do you know how many people died in that war-ridden world? When all the soldiers of suitable conscription age died, the ones fighting on the battlefield were just children who were just a bag of bones. You call that leisurely? As a normal person, being able to survive that long after an apocalyptic event, it really is a relaxing world. Mr. Peach Blossom smiled coldly as if to aggravate him further. You must know, it is almost worthless to be a post-human living in any worlds above E-level because they are that unpredictable. You might survive today, but you might not survive tomorrow just like you guys. What level is hyperthermal hell? Lin Sanjiu couldn't help asking. Mr. Peach Blossom eyed her for a moment, and replied with a smile, D-level. Lin Sanjiu turned pale. If this place which had already killed us twice is only D-level, how are the worlds that are sea level and above? When she thought of this, she asked with a slight tremble in her voice, how do you determine these levels? About that, it is related to the current situation you're all in. Mr. Peach Blossom reverted back to his easygoing smile. In all new worlds that are E-level and above, there is a random chance that how should I put it, an area-based trap will appear. We call these pocket dimensions. Pocket dimensions. The three of them parrot after him. It is just a term, it doesn't really matter. Just that this is the most commonly used term. A pocket dimension presents all sorts of life-threatening challenges just like in video games, and you can only exit a dungeon after you have successfully cleared that stage. For this particular pocket dimension, the counter will fall every time you die. When you've used up all three chances, you will really die then. So we really only have one chance left. Lin Sanjiu said in a daze. That's right, unexpectedly, it was the man with the katana that replied. Your performance in the last 2 rounds was so pathetic that it makes me want to cry. Lin Sanjiu accepted the humiliation silently, swallowing her words. It was true, they suffered a total defeat twice, that was a little. Noticing that their morale fell to the bottom with a single sentence from his companion, Mr. Peach Blossom grimaced, it's not really your fault. Your opponents are way more experienced. Let me introduce myself, I am Li Haijun, he's Heiziji. This round, will help you. Chapter 29, Discussing Pocket Dimensions and Wiping Out the Other Team. The names of these two people are weird enough. Lin Sanjiu roasted them silently in her heart. Are you Japanese? Luther asked Heiziji inquisitively, seeming to have forgotten that just moments before they were being threatened by that man. What? The latter replied in an irritated manner, frowning and showing Luther a what the hell are you talking about, look. Well, Japanese, or how should I put it, that is. Maybe in their world, they adopt a different convention in naming their children? We can't try to comprehend using our past experience and logic. Noticing that Heiziji's face was become darker by the second, Lin Sanjiu deeply feared that Heiziji would just grab his katana and sliced open Luther if that young man asked any more questions. She quickly changed the subject, I just want to ask what happened to our companion, Voli. Just as she finished her question, an intense overbearing murderous intent erupted from Heiziji's body. Unprepared, the pressure forced the three of them onto the ground again. Li Haijun hastily helped the two ladies up. He turned to his companion and complained, can you please control your ability? Heiziji looked displeased, but the overwhelming pressure and the display of strength finally dissipated. Luther, who did not receive any help because he was a male, stood up by himself and silently dusted the dirt off his body. Li Haijun gestured for everyone to board the bus to continue their conversation. He found a seat and sat down lazily. He casually scanned the bus and helped himself to a packet of chocolate cookies. While he started eating, he finally spoke, your friend called Tian Minbo escaped from us. That caught Lin Sanjiu's attention. Honestly speaking, to us entering this D-level world was something we didn't expect. Arriving in this low-level new world, we actually planned to treat it as a vacation. Li Haijun beamed as he pointed to his companion, but, some time back, this guy somehow developed a sudden compassion. He insisted on saving a man from another pocket dimension. And, that man was your Voli. When he saw the disbelief on everyone's faces, Haziji's face turned even darker. Tianminbo claimed that he admired us and wanted to be our lackey, swearing that he will follow us to his death. It was impossible to get rid of him. He really seemed rather eager, so I let him follow us for a period of time. Li Haijun sighed, vexation filled his limpid eyes. Who would have thought? After he had grown closer to us, he stole an important item from Ziji when we let our guard down for a moment and escaped in the night. Hearing this, the three of them were stunned. From their display of power, Li Haijun and his companion had no reason to lie. That would only mean. Lin Sanjiu thought about it for a moment and looked at Luther and Marcy, holding back her anger. He said that he was looking for companions. So from the start, he already planned to use us as his human shields. Before the two of them could reply, Li Haijun responded with his laid-back voice, I reckon that was his scheme. He had witnessed how I chased down others, so he probably knew that he couldn't go far by himself. So he thought that I wouldn't be able to catch him just because he joined a team. How he underestimated us, huh? I can find him even if he enters a pocket dimension. Marcy ran her fingers through her red hair and asked doubtfully, so where is he now? Why isn't he together with us? Li Haijun did not say a word. Instead, he glanced over at his companion. It is because of that item he stole, Haziji suddenly spoke, his gaze was cold and vicious. That is a special item which I spent a great deal of effort finding. It allows its user to forcefully break out from a pocket dimension. When he said that, the three of them immediately looked at him wide-eyed. There wasn't a need to explain how precious that item was, especially as Lin Sanjiu and the others only had one last chance at survival. If one could forcefully break out of a pocket dimension, doesn't that mean that they could gain an additional life? The three of them had almost changed their opinion about Haziji when they heard that he saved Voli once. However, the next moment, they witnessed a cold, calculating smile appearing at the side of his mouth. Once I get my item back, I am going to personally stuff him into an A-level pocket dimension. His calm tone was just like a predator making an opportune move as it hid in the jungle and oozed with danger. Lin Sanjiu shuddered for a second, involuntarily. There is a limit to the item, it can only be used 15 times. Otherwise, he would have abandoned all of you much earlier during the second round. It is not that easy to find human shields around. Li Haijun narrowed his eyes and sighed. With those words, Luther, being the upright young man he was, jumped up furiously. His face turned red with anger. When we find that son of AB*TCH, I am going to give him the thrashing of his life. Brother Jun, if there is any way we can help, just let us know. Seeing Li Haijun's cheerful expression, Lin Sanjiu rolled her eyes in her heart. She coughed and said softly, Luther, sit down. Our top priority is to survive and escape this pocket dimension. Right, since we are talking about this, entry into a pocket dimension is only possible at the point of commencement, so myself and Aji are actually illegal entrants. We can't actually help you in battle. Li Haijun's fox-like eyes narrowed with his smile, so we will provide you intel and play a supporting role. You can come up with your strategy. After we exit this pocket dimension, we still need a favor from all of you. Lin Sanjiu eyed him for a moment and felt a little indecisive. There is no such thing as a free lunch. This Li Haijun might be smiling, but he doesn't seem like he'll be an easy person to deal with. Who knows what he will ask from us as repayment for their kindness. But putting things in perspective, the three of them were in no position to negotiate. As she thought of this point, she gritted her teeth and gave a light nod to Luther and Marcy. Let's do this. Once the decision was made, the few of them started discussing their strategy. The information that Li Haijun and Haziji provided was so detailed that it was as though they knew the opponents personally. According to the duo, they managed to gather all the relevant intel about the opponents just after circling that area for a few rounds. Sure enough, just as what they had inferred during the second round, they were ambushed by a two-man team. The first member was a duoluazhong who always patrolled around the few blocks of buildings, and the other member was a human who was hiding on the 15th floor. Other than the fact that the duoluazhong was well nourished, and retained its normal build, they basically did not need to fear it. The one who was truly dangerous was actually that woman. Currently, the woman had already developed 2 skills: sniping and setting traps. Lin Sanjiu's party had already experienced the power of her sniping skills, and it was different from how military snipers worked. The metallic ray from that woman used was like a bullet. However, she neither faced any issues with accuracy associated with gun precision nor required a long time to take aim. All she had to do was to lock onto the target with her eyes and pull the trigger. No matter how good Lin Sanjiu's physical capabilities were, she hadn't reached the stage where she could be faster than a bullet. Furthermore, the greatest weakness of a sniper close combat was solved perfectly by her ability to lay traps. I actually wanted to head upstairs to take a look, but once I stepped into the building, I was shocked. From the first story all the way to the 15th story, the entire floors were covered with her traps. Even though it wasn't difficult to destroy those traps, but our illegal status will definitely be discovered, Li Haijun continued. You must know, we can't engage in a battle, because we will only be on the receiving end of the attacks. What sort of traps are these? Lin Sanjiu asked, feeling slightly anxious. I have no idea. Li Haijun shrugged. Didn't I tell you, I didn't try to set them off. Lin Sanjiu gave him a look of frustration. So you are saying, we shouldn't head upstairs, right? Li Haijun nodded calmly. How were we going to fight if we can't go upstairs? Lin Sanjiu could not help feeling disheartened. There is one more information you should all know. Beaming, Li Haijun passed Lin Sanjiu and Marcy each a bottle of water. In this pocket dimension, only your group retains memories of the previous rounds. The 3 of them instantly lifted their heads to listen. Even though yourselves and they entered the same pocket dimension, but them being on the attack team do not have any consciousness that they are in a pocket dimension. They were just doing what they planned to do on the same day when they first entered the pocket dimension, and that is to hunt. Li Haijun looked more and more excited as he said this. That is to say, if you attack today, you will still catch them off guard. If you strategize this right, your counterattacks should definitely work. Perhaps it was the unruffled manner in which Li Haijun had explained that, but the faint fear that surrounded their hearts seemed to have lessened. Li Haijun went through with them once again all the various points that they should pay attention to. After that, deciding that it should be sufficient, he called to the sleepy Haziji that it was time for them to alight. It is up to us now. Looking as the 2 of them walked into the distance, Lin Sanjiu looked at Luther and Marcy with her bright eyes, and said in a determined voice, we will definitely survive. Part 2 of the series ends here. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe so we can be motivated to make even better videos in the future.